What's up, guys? How's my audio? How's everything going? Welcome, welcome. I can hear. I hope that worked out well. That little video. I think I had something. I think now I know why. I gotta shut off my. How about that? Okay. How we doing, guys? Good sound. Everything good? Alrighty. People from all over San Francisco, Canada, Brazil, Baja. Pretty sweet. Bond Influence. Thank you, my friend. Oh, my goodness. I forgot that was even a thing, the super chat. Thank you, brother, Bond Influence. How are you? What's up, guys? UK, DT UK, you still here? Apologies to my friends over in the UK, who I know it's late by you. I promise that the next live stream I do will be different than this. Michael Poplowski, hello. Jeff Connor, what's going on? Hello. Matthew O'Clair, what's going on? What's up, guys? Long Island, Tampa, Miami, awesome. Billy Robertson, what's going on? New York City. Kevin Dorn, again, good to see you, brother. Kevin, reach out to me. I was serious about that. I'd love to hear from you. So Henrik, what's going on? I know, like I said, my friends in the UK, I swear, the next thing I do will be, I'm going to try to vary the times that we do these so that different people from different places can see. 1 a.m. Yeah, I know it's pretty late for a lot of you guys. Militime, Texas, what's going on? Bond on the run, what's going on? Awesome. 56 people in the chat, what's going on? Used to live in New York City. Murray, New Jersey. What part of New Jersey, brother? Dublin, Ireland. Paul Farrelly, what's going on? How are you? From Colonia. Beautiful, beautiful. Avon Park, Florida. More Canada. All right. Edinburgh, Scotland. What's going on? Scotland is on my bucket list. Philly, what's going on? Halloween special. Oh my God, I can't wait. For the Bond Complex. Matthew O'Clair, what's going on? San Diego, Italy. Wow, wait. Love it. The midnight streams. Yeah, we're kind of 1 a.m. in Spain. Oh, I love Spain. Beautiful. James Bond aficionado. What's going on? Where in Spain, by the way, are you? I spent a month in Spain. It was spectacular. More Edinburgh. More Scotland. The special executive. I know who that is. What's going on, Alan? Good to see you. Sunny South Florida. I assume that means. Alrighty. Oh crap, Kevin, I will clear out my sorry, I never checked that email, so I will I will clear it out so you can try it again. Yeah, the debate should be interesting. So, by the way, some of you guys already know this. I have set up a poll. If you're interested, the poll is in the description below. If you want to take the poll, it's a very simple one. Thumbs up or thumbs down for Spectre. As of right now, it's not looking good for Spectre. 27% thumbs up, 73% thumbs down. But so we'll keep checking that. We'll come back to it every so often. After we talk to Tom Sears from James Bond Radio, who and I'll tell you that Tom is, for quite a while. I think before, months ago even, Tom said to me, he says, hey, when you finally get to your Spectre thing, let me know, because I'm a big fan of Spectre, and I want to kind of, defend it a little bit. So I said, absolutely. So finally, when the Spectre review was done, I called him up and said, Tom, you ready? He said, hell yeah. So he is ready to go. So, I see thumbs up. I see thumbs down in the comments. Yeah, it's well, I mean, you guys, I'm sure, have already seen the review I did with Scott. I was not too kind to it. I did score it a 2. Yeah, not so great. But maybe Tom will, kind of help out a little bit. Then, of course, after Tom, we have Kyle Barbeau. You might know him from Instagram. His handle is Easy Smiles and Expensive Watches. And he's a big Bond fan, known him for a very long time now. So things are about to get heated. Well, Tom's a good guy to talk to because, Tom and I, he's Ladies Who Bond, what's going on? Tom is very good because he's just like me. He can have a very even keeled conversation. Not everything has to be a fight, so we can just share ideas, and it's great. I do believe Spectre was a wasted opportunity. That is a good way to say it. Yeah, it's funny because honestly, the more I obviously when I do these reviews, I sort of tend to spend like a couple weeks analyzing the film. Like between the time, like when Scott and I start doing a review, I'll basically, sit down and watch the movie. I haven't seen it in a little while. We'll watch it all the way through. And then, we'll record, we'll talk, we'll, go back and forth. And it's, and then of course I have, depending on how involved it is, I'll have time after that to do a lot of editing. And during the editing process, I'll say, oh, I just thought of that. I could have said that. Or maybe just something, I'm thinking about something a little bit differently as I'm sort of bringing in the clips, etc. So yeah, I mean, honestly, it's funny. Drinking water, yeah. Shane, I'm giving the wine a break tonight. I think I'll wait for Kyle, and then maybe I'll crack a beer. Yeah. So honestly, doing these reviews, it really, I feel like I have weeks of, really thinking the movie through. And honestly, some of the things that, Scott threw out and just thinking about it afterwards, I have sort of come to the conclusion that it probably wouldn't have taken that much to really get this film on track. Even some small tweaks could have really made a difference. So, Mendes had said that Skyfall, the symbolism is mother and the Spectre is the father. Now that's interesting. Interesting. Okay. Let's see. Casino Royale, Skyfall, Spectre, Quantum of Solace, in that order. Yeah, I would say that's pretty fair. In fact, the next ranking video, well, I got the Brosnans to do first, but then I'll be doing the Craigs. I sort of feel like the next two ranking videos I do are not going to be like big surprises. The Brosnans are probably going to be... Actually, the Brosnans will be interesting because I'm not really even sure myself. Yeah, hard to say. But the Craigs will probably be fairly obvious. So let's see. So Dave's brainwipe didn't work on you. Well, yeah, I seem to have gotten it back pretty quickly. The Bond influence, what's going on? All right, so should we bring in Tom Sears? I think we'll bring him in and get this discussion underway. I'll be back. I'll give you some updates on the poll. Let's see. Should I check now and see if there's any changes? Again, 73 to 27. Oh, wow. Okay, so more people. Let's see. It's kind of leveled out, actually, a little bit. Let's see if I can... Sorry for the pause. I need to have like a director who does this for me. But check out the new results already. It's already kind of evening out. Is that the effect of when, when something is getting beaten up too much, you sort of want to rescue it a little bit? 42 to 58 now. It's a little more level. Still less, still more people who don't like it than do, but that's not the beating it was getting earlier. So we'll see as the night progresses. So be sure to take the poll if you want to contribute. All right, so listen, let's not keep Tom waiting. Let's bring him in. And as soon as we're done, I'll be back, talk a little more, check the poll. We'll bring in Kyle. Here we go. Let's bring in Tom. Tom Sears, welcome to Superfight 2, the Battle for Spectre. What's going on, brother?
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited for this because I'm on a lonely little island, which is a big time Spectre lover, and I know most people don't seem to be on that island with me. So I'm excited to, plead my case and talk a bit of Spectre.
I love that too, and I love that you said that you actually, I mean, you don't just think it's better than average. You're a full blown fan of Spectre.
Yeah. Dude, I proper love it. I'd even go so far as to say I adore Spectre, and some of the conversations I see on social media and stuff, it saddens me because I only ever really see negative stuff, and it talks in the context of it being nothing but a massive disaster, and that for me that is just not my experience at all. I adore the film. Yeah.
I'll tell you this, and I'm going to ask you flat out if this is if it's part nostalgia on your part, because I remember James Bond Radio. You guys were going strong leading up to Spectre, and I remember you guys did like a spectacular. Was it 30 days of you had a podcast every single day for like 30 days the month it came out?
Yeah. Well, it's a funny one because when did we start the podcast? It was the year before, I think. I think it was February 2014. So anyway, in the lead up to Spectre, we were, getting all excited for it and stuff. And then very close to the end, we got one of our listeners, Rory, managed to get 3 tickets. And we'd never met Rory at that point. And he messaged us and said, listen, do you want to go to this premiere with me? And we're like, let me just check my diary and see if I'm busy there. And so he got us into the premiere, and it was such an amazing thing. Such an amazing experience. And I guess you could look at it in any way, in the sense that you do that whole red carpet thing, you're standing there inches away from Daniel as he's being interviewed and all the rest of it. And then you go in and watch this film. It's either that might color your opinion of the film and be like, you're so caught up in the event that you'll take anything at that point, Likewise, you could also say being swept up in that whole premiere experience and all that kind of stuff was so amazing that the film could never live up to that experience either. So it's like, I to be honest, I remember sitting down there, and I was sitting next to Chris, and then Rory was sitting on the other side of Chris. And I remember at the moment where, just after the car chase, parachute, his feet land down, and, the parachute sort of billows off behind him. I remember just turning to both of them and going, I love this film. And they both like smiled and was like, me too. And it was just this great moment. Yeah, so I don't know whether nostalgia comes into it in the bigger sense of that term. I think it does, because it takes me back to that old school Bond feeling that I've missed for quite a while. So what I will say, man, is I think Casino Royale is an absolute masterpiece, and for me it kind of level pegs with Majesty's. I think Majesty's is like a millimeter above Casino for me, but I don't know, man. Some days it could go the other way. So that's a tricky thing when you've got such a high watermark like that.
Yeah.
It might be the best Bond film ever made. It's that good, So of course we're always going to compare everything that comes after that to Casino Royale. And I remember going to see Quantum, coming out being like, man, the Casino was so good and Quantum just didn't cut the mustard compared to that. Went along to see Skyfall, and I must admit, I'm a bit lukewarm on Skyfall. I'm not mad about it. I don't dislike the film. I enjoy it. I've watched it loads and saw it at the Albert Hall last year when they did the live concert thing. And, I like the film, but I don't love it, and then Spectre comes along, dude. And it's the film I wanted, man. And granted, it's not perfect. There are definitely things about it that aren't right, but for me, it was that whole thing of you're rebooting Bond from scratch. You're going back to Casino Royale, Bond's just getting his 00 stripes. You go into Quantum and you've got this secret organization that are having amazing meetings in opera houses in Austria or wherever that was. And it's like, oh my God, you're basically doing the Spectre thing. And then Skyfall came along, and I so wanted that storyline to continue, and then it just didn't happen. It was completely unrelated, and I was like, damn it, man, So for me, if it had gone Casino, Quantum, Spectre, that for me is the holy trilogy as far as I'm concerned, So that stuff of Blofeld being back pleases me massively. The whole thing, and for me, I think, granted, the last act is where it kind of crumbles a bit, or a lot, as some would say. But I do think you've got 2 solid hours of greatness, and it's as soon as he's out of that torture chair, that's obviously where it takes a tumble, and it's a 2.5 hour film, isn't it? And it's ultimately where that should have gone is you have the torture chair sequence, and then you have all the dudes in the matching uniforms arrive, big gun battle, massive old school you only live twice kind of, you know, set piece battle, and that's ends. You know, it should have been maybe a 2 hour 10-minute film rather than a 2.5 hour film.
Right. Okay. That's good stuff. I'm curious. I know it's, you know, your partner Chris is notorious for avoiding spoilers, like to the point where he sticks his fingers in his ears, and I love that. When you saw Spectre for the first time, was the Blofeld thing a surprise, or did you sort of know already by then?
God, no, I called that from day one. They're not very good at keeping those secrets, are they? So I think they should not do it. You know, you could tell Eve, Field Agent Eve. I mean, when do you call somebody Field Agent Eve? You know, when you don't get a last name, you know something's up, you know?
Right.
So I knew that was going to be Moneypenny. I knew Gareth Mallory was going to be him. Like, you could see it written all over their faces.
Yeah.
And you call a film Spectre, of course Blofeld is going to be in the film called Spectre. So it was, I'm right in thinking you're not a fan of this, are you? I've heard you say negative things about Spectre over the years.
No, I'm definitely not a fan. I'm definitely on the other end of that spectrum. But I'll tell you, and it's funny because like as we're talking again, like I sort of hate, like I hate the idea that I'm gonna try to chisel away at your love of this film, but I'm gonna chisel away. Well, before I do it, give me like your top three like points, like if you had to sum up in like 3 bullet points, like, well, here's why Spectre is so good.
Well, I've written some notes.
Here we go.
Here we go, man. I've come prepared.
Nice.
Right. So, okay, I don't know if I can boil it down to 3 points, but what I will do is I will talk about the things I love. I'll talk about the things I love about it to the point, and then I'll talk about where I think it does go wrong and what should have been different. So, pre-title sequence, I think, is up there with the best of them. Like that visually, the feel of it, that moment, man, where, you know, he's macking out on his Bond girl and all of a sudden she turns around, where are you going? And he's like, I'll be right back. And he's out the window. Dude, that is the Bond I've been missing for so long, you know, because Daniel comes in. I love Daniel. He's brilliant. I'm not a huge fan of the mopey, depressed Bond. You know, that's not really what I want from my Bond. I love my GoldenEye Pierce. I gave him the limp Bond. Do you know what I mean? That's what makes me smile and gets me excited. That's what that is. Strutting across that rooftop, man. Bond has never looked so good, you know. You've got an amazing stunt with that helicopter loop thing. That to me is always a good sign. When you've got one of those like groundbreaking stunts like that, that's where Bond belongs, in that pocket where he's doing things that nobody else can, you know. And I feel that's great. Very happy with that pre-title sequence. My other favorite scenes, I love the Lucia Sciarra and the assassins moment. That to me might even be a top 5 Bond moment in the whole series. I adore it. I love the way it looks, the feel of it, the way she walks through and you see the dude behind the door waiting to kill her. She's given up. She knows it's about to happen. And just how cheeky it is, man. You see her, she winces, getting ready. You hear the camera just moves like that, and there's Bond stood there. And dude, the way he swaggers up to her, he's got a little head wobble as he walks up to her, walks into focus, and she's like, you only bought me 5 minutes. He's like, excellent, time for a drink. That is that same thing. That is that Bond I haven't seen for a long time, you know, a flippant remark like that, man. And I get chills even talking about it, because that is my Bond right there. That sort of moment. He's just done something really fucking cool, and he makes a flippant little remark, gives her a smirk, and off he goes. He just turns away and walks away to fix the drinks. I love that scene, man. That is brilliant. Next up, Spectre meeting. Loved it. I think that was... It couldn't have been executed any better. I think that whole meeting, the way he comes in, how fearful everybody seems of Blofeld. They're all sitting there shaking in their boots as soon as he walks in. That whole thing of how he's perfectly in silhouette, it's like going back to the old days, man. And that thing of when he sort of stops and just turns his head slightly and the guy comes and just moves the microphone in. It's just, he oozes power. He's a small dude. He oozes power. And I think that scene is played to absolute perfection. And I love it. I love after the with the thing I just talked about with the parachute, you know, ejector seat kind of thing. That I think is also played to perfection. Excuse me, I've got I'm just drinking some fizzy water and I'm getting some burp. you know, that whole thing with the ejector seat and the parachute, it's like that could have so been done wrong, and it could have gone so very die another day, you know, and been so in your face. The fact you don't even see the parachute and it's just all left to your imagination, I think is just right for the flavor of Daniel's Bond. In this film, it's more of that classic Bond feel without pushing it too far. So I love that. I love them underplaying that a little bit. Car chase, granted, it's not a great car chase, but the end of it, love it. The Mr. White scene, man, I love that too. That just feels like Fleming. Like, sure, you imagine you've got the whole, the roots of that. Excuse me, you can edit that out. The roots of that is, you know, Octopussy, isn't it? That whole story, the Octopus book, that is. You've got the whole Major Dexter Smythe, Bond goes to visit him, and there's the whole story about Hans Oberhauser hunting for the gold. Dexter Smythe obviously kills Oberhauser and keeps the gold for himself. Bond gives him the choice of, you know, suicide or a court martial, you know. And I feel like that's obviously not the scene we're seeing, but it's like the DNA of that scene is obviously born from that, I believe, anyway. And you've got that whole thing. He picks up Bond's gun, turns it and shoots himself. That to me is a scene straight out of Fleming, or it feels much like it, you know. Love that. I think it's brilliant. The train fight, man, seeing Bond in a white dinner jacket. Oh my goodness me. Brilliant. Love it. Brutal fight. We've not seen Bond pushed to the edge like that before. You know, there's that one moment where like he's holding him up against the wall and he lets Bond go when Madeline shows up, and Bond just crumbles on the floor and he's completely ruined. Love seeing that, man. That was a great fight. Brilliant stuff. I also think, what have we got now? Oh yeah, I forgot the kite dancing in a hurricane. That's a great line. That's one for the ages. I like Blofeld's meteor speech, right? That whole thing, they go into this in the super dark room. The way he just looms up out of the darkness is so creepy, and it's so right for what Blofeld is, you know, just puppet master in the darkness, controlling everything. Love that. So yes, I like all that. One thing, and then obviously the torture chair. I like the torture chair. I like the whole Colonel Sun thing. Colonel Sun, for a long time, was my favorite non-Fleming book until Forever and a Day came out, and that's jumped up to first position. But I do love Colonel Sun, and I was very excited that there was, you know, that bit taken from it. Obviously, after that, that's when things take a turn for the worse. Granted, 100%. I think that's all I've got to say for now. So you come at me, bro, and I will see what I've got.
Well, I'll tell you this. I mean, I feel like every point you made, I really, there's not a lot I can even really take issue with. I think you're absolutely right. The high points are very good. You know, maybe I would take a couple issues with some minor points, but in general, everything you're saying is spot on. And your enthusiasm is frankly a little infectious. You know, let me ask you this. It's funny how you said in the beginning that you're sort of lukewarm on Skyfall, but you like Spectre. And I said to myself, you know, I'm probably kind of an easy lay when it comes to the visual look of a film, because I feel like Skyfall I can watch any day of the week, and probably half of the reason is because I think it's just so gorgeous and lush. Yeah. The colors are vivid. And then of course you go to Spectre, which for some reason they did this whole sepia tone over the whole thing. Did the color wash put you off at all?
Do you know what? It's funny you should mention that, because just yesterday I was seeing, I forget where I saw it now, but somebody posted like a color corrected version of it, of Spectre, and it was just like some various shots that they corrected it. And I don't know why that's a thing these days, but a lot of films are like that. It's almost like, let's take out as much color as we can and just make it look a lot darker. And I guess for certain movies that works as a tonal thing. But yeah, no, granted, I would definitely, you know, what I saw of what that dude did, the color correction, I wish it looked like that. I wish that, because I'm sure, you know, why you have to put that filter on, God only knows. I'm in support of that. Yeah.
I kind of suspected maybe because they just realized, well, we can't get Roger Deakins. We can't compete with that look. Why don't we just try something else and experiment? Yeah, it's not a good. So how about this? Let me hit you with some. And by the way, I also liked what you said about the finale, like when Bond breaks out. I totally agree that I kind of feel like everything from the torture chair forward is where it just totally loses its footing. Yeah. And Bond's escape is just, again, ridiculously
too easy.
Like, Yeah, and you know, again, and for a film that had a budget of depending who you ask, 300 million. I mean, you should have had a pretty spectacular finale.
Yeah.
But I actually think I could probably, now that you mentioned that, I'm thinking probably two tweaks could have really fixed it. One, a good size, like you said, like a classic. The cavalry comes in. There's an assault on the location. M comes through, and there's soldiers there, and that's how Bond gets out. That could have fixed that. Then I also think if you move that train fight to the end and sort of did one of those sort of classic taglines where like Teehee shows up at the end, and I can't take credit for this because my buddy Scott came up with this, and I said that's pretty spot on. Yeah. Just shift that to the end, and that's how it closes. I think you'd end up on a pretty.
Dude, I really like that. You know, when you see Blofeld's crater base, it's like you're going to give me a "You Only Live Twice" style villain's base. Give me the "You Only Live Twice" style ending. You know, like give me that massive. See, the other thing I do like, which it did misfire for me, is that huge explosion of Blofeld's base at the end. That was a record-breaking explosion at the time. Might still be. I don't know whether it's been beaten or not. But like, if that had have been the end of that sequence where you have the huge gun battle, loads of people running around in matching uniforms and stuff.
Putting bombs in places.
Yeah, that's what we all want to see, man. We want to see that. We want to see Bond leading those people. And then they all stand back. Massive, like, world-shattering explosion. That's the end sequence. Then Bond's having dinner on the train. I like that, man. That's the ending I feel like we should have had. The problem with it is, man, is that there was a few silly choices that are just so contrived. So like when they get back to London, the only reason it goes back to London is so they can have that thing of, we're right in front of the Houses of Parliament in Big Ben, and we're literally within MI6 where all of this stuff has previously taken place, and we can reference the silver thing and all the rest of it, and you have that Adam West Batman thing where they're tied up with the bomb and all that. It's just sort of too I get why they did that, but it's just obviously it's a bit too contrived, isn't it? You know what I mean? Dude, if they'd have done that big gun battle at the crater base, they'd have probably saved 50 million. They wouldn't have
you're absolutely and that whole thing at MI6 honestly to me is sort of bafflingly bad because, like you said, I mean, first of all, among other things, I feel like it totally took away like everything you said about the buildup of Blofeld, the meeting, and people are terrified of him. I mean, the whole reason why Blofeld is powerful is because he has an army of people who are willing to stand by him. Then, for some reason, he shows up at MI6 by himself, literally no one there. Yeah. So it's just him in the helicopter with the helicopter pilot. Yeah. So he's helpless. I mean, frankly, it's very easy for Bond to take him in because he let himself be helpless. Well, what happened to this guy?
Yeah. Well, the other thing as well, there's no way on God's green earth should Blofeld have been captured at the end of that film. That if they were going to have that sequence, Bond gets to the chopper and he's gone. There's no sign of Blofeld.
Right.
Jumped in his Bartho sub and he's buggered off down the Thames or something. Like that's what that should. Blofeld never gets captured, man. He always escapes at the end. Yeah. I don't care what anybody says, and you're going to have that.
Right. And I honestly, I sort of feel like it's almost the way he's taken out so easily, so simply, and just marched off to jail. It almost kind of makes me feel like maybe the buildup shouldn't have been as big then. Like I almost feel like it's almost like the worse the ending was, it starts to chip away from me the big boardroom stuff because, again, I mean, we prop this guy up to be a master criminal, genius criminal, and then he just does something that silly and foolish to get himself, I mean, taken away.
Man, in full agreement. That ending is not the way it should have gone. Like, if anything, yeah, I really like that idea of the train fight happening at the end of the film. That's such a throwback to, Goldfinger even, you know what I mean, at the end there. It's, you'd have that monster explosion and then, cut to the next scene and they're sifting through the wreckage and there's just no sign of Blofeld's body anywhere. Yeah. Where did he go? And that's how it goes, Yeah. And then, maybe you have the Marvel style ending where he's sitting in his chair, stroking his cat, laughing at the end or something. I don't know. That'd probably be too much, but you know what I'm saying. So great, man. Yeah, for sure.
It's interesting how easy it would have been to move that too, because honestly, I mean, like, Bond is wearing his tux, she's wearing a dress. We haven't seen these outfits before. We didn't see Hinks at the base.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have to explain how he got away, etc. He just sort of went away for a little while, and then all of a sudden he shows up again. So it would have been a real simple fix. Just so really the only thing you'd have to film differently would be the big assault on that
Yeah.
base. And why the hell not? Because I mean, again, you've spent the money. You wouldn't have to do any of that back in London stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of feel like the only reason they might have done that, again, see, one of the problems I have with this one, and it's a similar problem I have with Quantum, is that, like you said, Casino was spot on perfect, and all of a sudden, like, well, we need to do more of that. So they sort of do like an unofficial sequel, and then it's like, well, that didn't work out so well because we're just piggybacking off what we did before. Then you do Skyfall, it's fresh and new and different, and then Spectre, I kind of felt like was piggybacking off of Skyfall. So I kind of felt like that whole London thing. Well, Skyfall was good because he was back in London. You know, this is an English hero. We need to go back to London. We need to have Q and Moneypenny do stuff. So we have them there. M show up again. So I sort of feel like they did all that stuff for kind of the wrong reasons. And right, as far as the story goes, it didn't end on that punch that it needed.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said before, I almost wish it went Casino, Quantum, Spectre. Like, to me, because you've got all of that dark underground organization, quantum stuff happening, and it was like that's what I was so pumped for, man. And of course, legally back then they couldn't have done Spectre anyway.
Sure.
But you know, of course it was retconned in afterwards. I mean, of course, legally it was only ever going to be that, you know.
Yeah.
But for me, the way it was going, you know, with how Mr. White comes in at the end of Casino, and he's like, you know, our organization values loyalty or whatever it is he says over money. And you're like, what's this organization all about? And then that built on in Quantum, and then no mention of it in Skyfall. And that's a big part of why I was like, it's just.
Well, you know, it's funny. I'll tell you what. I mean, honestly, as you're saying that, I'm saying to myself, but you know, it's one of the things that I always found sort of fascinating is that whether they planned it or not, the 4 Craig films really sort of followed the tradition of the first 4 Connerys. Yeah. Where Dr. No, you know, had Spectre lurking in the background. From Russia with Love, even more so. We're kind of now getting really into that Spectre thing. And then they skip it with Goldfinger. We just kind of do this off thing. But then my Thunderball, we're right back in, and we're really sort of explaining even more about this organization. So this one sort of followed that same template, that same model. So it could have worked. But I agree with you. It is funny how it does totally just skip Skyfall altogether, almost to the point where they forgot about it. But one of the frustrations I have with it is that, just like you said, they kind of kept hinting at the organization. So it was almost like when they finally got around to doing Spectre, I almost felt like they were trying to retcon this whole organization that had been there all along, when they didn't have to retcon it because they had been leading up to it. It's almost like they forgot what they started. Because like you said, they had the trouble in Quantum where they started calling the organization Quantum. They should have just called it the Project Quantum or something or other. And it was almost like they kind of knew they couldn't do Spectre, so we're going to have to make up this other one called Quantum. If they just sort of left that alone, you wouldn't have had the kind of problems. But so now they get to Spectre, and it's almost like now he's saying that he pulled the strings the entire time, etc. I mean. And the scene where he's walking through MI6 with the little Xerox copies of people's faces, I kind of was like, yeah. Plus they put Silva in there, and I'm like that's why I say the feel I get from it is that they forgot where they were headed, and now they're kind of just trying to correct course a little bit where they never needed to. So it was like they're almost filling in the backstory the wrong way.
Well, the way I look at that is the Quantum group is like a subset of Spectre, you know what I mean? Along those lines, you know what I mean? It is that organization, but it's the X department. It's one of the initial Spectre is now Quantum or something, you know. Right. So yeah, it's a tricky one, and I think the thorn in that is obviously Skyfall coming along when it did. I guess you could say, in the sense that, you know, if Silver's mission was to kill M, that could have been orchestrated by Blofeld on some level, you know what I mean? He wants M gotten rid of, so who does he go to? The one who hates her the most, you know what I mean? Right. Blofeld and to Silver, that is. So you could explain it, and of course it is a little bit awkward because, you know, it wasn't planned from day one. You know, it had McClory died earlier, and they'd have sold the rights earlier before. Then I'm sure we'd have started out with Casino, and all the things would have been like. Hopefully, it would have been lined up from there. So yeah, of course it is. It under the circumstances, it couldn't be anything but a little bit of an awkward shift there. But I for one, I'm glad they did it, man. Because I have dreamed of seeing Spectre on the big screen again since I was a wee lad, since I first discovered Bond, and I can't tell you how excited I was when they revealed the title at that press event, and it was just seeing the letters appear on the screen. I don't think I've ever been more excited for anything in my life.
I'm with you there. I it's interesting because we can sort of look back at the whole Craig tenure, and it's interesting because again they sort of started with Casino Royale. We actually got Vesper for the first time, and I think after Casino was over, the first question Bond fans had was, so what's next? Like, are we now going to follow sort of the Fleming timeline again? Are we eventually going to meet Tracy? Are we going to et cetera, et cetera? Yeah. So they have sort of come up with, they take parts of Fleming and they've kind of redesigned, the world of Bond with a little Fleming, a little not so much. But I'll ask you the big question, the elephant in the room: Bond and Blofeld are brothers,
right?
Yes, no.
Right. Okay. We all knew this was going to come up eventually.
Yeah.
So here's how I look at that. Right. Again, it's a similar thing to the end of the film in the sense that it's like, gee, how can we make this have more emotional impact? I know. Let's do that. Right. Now, Hans Oberhauser being a father figure to Bond is absolutely a Fleming thing. That is that backstory. Hans Oberhauser, ski instructor for Bond when he was a kid and all the rest of it. Mm-hmm. So love that, man. Anytime we can get some Fleming in there, super happy with that. Yeah. Now, it's not a good idea. I don't like the fact that Blofeld and Bond knew each other as kids, right? I don't like that. That's not the route that they should have gone. It's too contrived. It's that's all that needs to be said about it, really. But it's too contrived. However, it's not as bad as most people make out, in the sense that they're not brothers. They're not even stepbrothers. They're not related at all. So it's like, it's not that. It's basically, Blofeld even says it in the film, doesn't he? He's like, Bond spent 2 winters with us and Dad said, treat him like a brother. And that's it.
Right.
And I think there's some confusion with that as well, whereas a lot of people think his whole motive now is to create Spectre just to get back at Bond, which isn't true. Like, if you listen to what Blofeld says, and I've actually written this down to prepare for it. He says, a nice pattern developed. You interfered in my world and I destroyed yours. Or do you think that was a coincidence, all the women in your life ending up dead, right? So it's like, in my mind, what that means is, Blofeld, lunatic. He starts this puppet master organization. He's got powers and behind the scenes and orchestrating lots of things. And of course, Bond being on the other side of that as a spy for MI6, he's of course going to stumble into things that Blofeld is involved with over the years. So what he's saying is that basically you stumbled into my world, and every time you did, Vesper ended up dead or M ended up dead. You know what I mean? So that, to me, when people say that Spectre, the organization is Blofeld's sole sort of motivation is to get back at Bond for the skiing stuff as kids. I don't get that at all. I don't think that's true.
Okay.
It's just that, of course, they grow up on opposite sides of the thing. So yeah, it is lame, man. You don't want any Blofeld and Bond link as kids, but it isn't quite as bad as people say. When they say they're brothers, they're absolutely not brothers. They never were. They weren't stepbrothers. They weren't anything of the sort. It's just that one quote that Blofeld says about treat him like a brother, and then that's what everybody leads with. So yeah, granted, not a good idea. I'd have much preferred it if he'd have just been this random lunatic that, I think, to be honest, that's such a ham-fisted way of trying to make it more of an emotional gut punch.
Yeah.
I feel like it would have just been better if he'd have been a random lunatic, and for some reason, Bond stumbles into his world a couple of times, so he just gets obsessed with fucking with this guy because he's messed with his plans a couple of times, and he's just like almost like a stalker, like a random lunatic stalker who's just with ruining Bond's life because he's meddled with his plans.
Okay, I'll tell you. I like. I like what you're saying, and I kind of feel like I mean, at the end of the day, like, and again, like when Scott and I were talking about the movie, he kind of said the same thing, like okay, they know each other, moving on, and you just don't focus on it. For me, I find it to be incredibly distracting, and I mean that's the thing. I feel like the things in this film, and in fairness, on one hand, I guess I could say, yeah, it's there, it's not such a big deal, look the other way. But then there are other moments in the film where I'm like, I think this thing is really being sort of shoved down my throat a little bit, and I kind of feel like it's one thing to say, to sort of dismiss it a little bit. You're absolutely right. They're not technically, they were never brothers. They were just people. He took him in, but he never adopted him, etc. So it's not that quite that bad. So I guess the argument is that, well, Blofeld was a bad dude. He was always going to be what he became. He was always going to be the criminal organization, and et cetera, et cetera. The fact that James Bond is a secret agent was sort of like a little, oh, well, here's a nice little plus. This guy's mingling, so now I can mess with him a little bit. Yeah. But I really do feel like there's too many moments that, like, again, when Bond walks into MI6 and sees the copies of the faces, taped up on the walls. I mean, again, it has to be one of the silliest moments I could even think of. Like, I mean, like somebody literally went down to Staples and printed out pictures, and then, okay, you hang this over there and whatever.
You sound like my dad, because my dad always rips the piss out of Bond. Ever has done since I was a kid. And I remember him ripping the piss out of GoldenEye when I was a kid, because he was taking the mickey out of Alec Trevelyan's, base underneath the whole satellite dish thing. And he was like, right, so hold on a minute. So who were the contractors that came along and like dug that place out and then wallpapered and carpeted the whole place and bought all the computers? And it was just like, shut up, Dad, let me get on with it.
Yeah. And there is, I totally admit there's some of that. And honestly, like I said before about Skyfall, like, it's funny, like I'm kind of an easy lay when it's a good looking movie, etc. Because I do say to myself, like Skyfall was still riddled with all sorts of plot holes, and for some reason I seem to be much more willing to let that go than I am with Spectre. For some reason, Spectre kind of like just every little thing kind of drives me a little nutty. But I kind of feel like I think part of it is that Spectre had a little more of sort of a forward momentum where at least you were kind of on the same page. Like I kind of go back to some of the earlier Bonds where, Bond gets called into M's office. M gives him the mission, gives him the here's the exposition, here's the what's going on, and here's what you have to go do. And Bond kind of goes out. So as a viewer, we sort of, all right, well, we get what we're doing. So now when Bond does something, we kind of say, okay, that's one step closer to what we're trying to do. It feels good. It's satisfying. And in these kind of later Craigs, it's a lot of it is just very paint by numbers, where we just start at one point. We don't really get the mission, etc. They'll try to make some sort of inciting incident, like in Quantum. Like Quantum is a weird one for me, because again, like there's the scene where Mitchell sort of tries to shoot M, fails, and then he goes away, and then Bond goes off and does stuff, and I feel like every so often Bond will say, well, I'm doing this because someone tried to kill, and you kind of go, oh yeah, I forgot that was kind of a thing that we're doing here. Yeah. So the whole structure, tying everything together, is not quite there, and I kind of felt like maybe with Skyfall there's still some of that, but I think we still got it more or less from the beginning, at the very least. Like, this guy stole the thing, so here we go. I felt like with Spectre, we just sort of kept moving to new things, not really knowing why. Like, again, like, and M drops him that, like Judi Dench's M sends the video, shoot this guy, and then go to the funeral. And it kind of bugs me, like, again, if she's giving Bond, don't give Bond cryptic clues. Like, tell him what to look for when he gets there. Don't just say here, because I mean that's obviously something for the audience. Well, we're just going to tell you this much, and we'll let it. Like, later on, there's a scene where I used to complain about this, but I stopped when Mr. White told Bond, L'American, etc. It's not a person, it's a place. And I remember thinking, like, again, why is everybody speaking in coded clues? Like, I mean, I get that we're the audience, and I get that we're not supposed to get everything handed to us all at once. We have to sort of unravel a little bit. But in the case of Mr. White, I'm like, all right, he knows there's eyes everywhere. He knows that everything he's saying, somebody's going to overhear. So he's trying to be cryptic. All right, so that one I give a pass to. But then I go back to Judi Dench. I'm like, no, you have to tell him what he's doing. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So I kind of feel like the whole structure of the film has that kind of just sort of breadcrumb connected dots feel to it. And again, I feel like with every step I'm asking, why are we doing this? So that's, I guess that's kind of why I kind of get a little, and I kind of forget how I even got started on this, but I guess that's why my suspension of disbelief is not as active as it could be sometimes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do think there is, and granted, why didn't M say, go and kill, Marco Sciarra, and by the way, Blofeld's going to be at the funeral, so look out for him, keep an eye on that dude because he's trouble. And of course that there is a bit of dramatic license in there. But again, you do get that kind of stuff, like completely illogical stuff like that in most Bond films, though. Like in Skyfall, why does he go back to his family home with M? Why is that the set piece? You know what I mean? Right. It's probably the last place you'd go. So it's just because it's the same thing. It's trying to make.
Why didn't you stop along the way and buy some guns and maybe some food?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's trying to do that same thing that Spectre did, trying to have a super emotional gut punch ending, in a setting that's super emotional for Bond and all that kind of stuff. There's stuff like that in all of them, really, and it's just. There does come a point where, you and I on our podcast can sit and analyze every second of a Bond film forever.
Sure.
There does come a point, I think, where you can overthink those things.
Yeah.
And it would be nice if everything lined up perfectly and everything was super logical. But I mean, the times you can count that's actually happened is probably, I don't know, one film maybe or two. You know what I mean? So I do feel like you do have to give some level of leeway with things. And I suppose with that sort of thing it's everybody talking in coded clues. For me, that's just entertaining. It's spycraft, isn't it? And it's illogical. I mean, at the end of the day, would they really give Bond a brand new Aston Martin on every mission? No, they wouldn't. So you turn a blind eye to that sort of logic as well, and all that stuff. But it doesn't stop it from being fucking brilliant. You know what I mean? In an Aston. So there is that, and I think we all just have a different tolerance for that, don't we? In the sense that what you're willing to let go, I might not be. For example, right now we're reviewing Die Another Day, and some people will say in the comments of like, you're too harsh on this film. Like, you've got an invisible car, yet you're happy for the Bondola in Moonraker, things like that. And it's like, that's kind of granted. Yeah. But for me, like with things like that, those older films, as ridiculous as that is, and laser battles in space, there's still a charm about them that I can't deny. You know what I mean? For me personally, Die Another Day, there's nothing to like in there. It's just not good. Whereas with all of those, for every Bondola moment, there's also something just really cool that happens as well. You know what I mean? Sure. So there's a certain charm, and we all have a different tolerance to that kind of stuff in different ways.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct, and I totally confess. Again, there are times when I find. See, I guess I'm sort of doing the question in my mind, like, am I noticing the cracks here and not here? Is it because I just like this one better, or is it the film is doing something to sort of keep me from noticing the cracks? Again, we talked about Casino Royale, which again I think is, if not flawless, as close to a flawless Bond film as I can recall. So they're doing something there. In fact, I've argued with people. I said I'll argue that this film is just absolutely perfect, and I can't find a single thing wrong with this film. And then somebody will say, in the free running thing, when Malaki goes up the thing up to the crane, why does Bond chase him up? Why doesn't he just wait for him to come back down? He has to come back down. And I'll be like, and I'll sit like, well, there has to be a reason, because in my mind, I'm saying, but this movie's perfect. There's nothing wrong with this. But again, I sort of also argue that, again, the film is doing it. It's almost like if the film is working, then a lot of these things will get by me and I won't even notice it. I mean, there's probably other, like, in terms of non-Bond movies, I could think there's probably plenty where maybe years later I'll go back or maybe I'll listen to a podcast or a video where somebody says, why did this happen? I'm going, oh yeah, that doesn't make any sense now that you say it. But the film kept my attention, kept me on my toes the whole entire time. So I just didn't catch it.
Yeah.
But with Spectre, I catch it.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things to be said there. Like, especially if you think of scene that always stands out to me like that, that's utterly pointless, but in an otherwise brilliant film. You Only Live Twice. You know, Helga Brandt's got him there in the chair. She's got the scalpel up to his face. And then all of a sudden she gets in a plane, flies up into the air, parachutes out, sacrifices a perfectly good plane that probably was quite expensive to kill Bond. Why didn't she just cut his throat when she had him right there? But it's, you know, it's entertaining on some level. So it's, you know, those things do happen. But I do think there's also a lot to be said for, there are just some Bond films you prefer over others, in the sense that, like, for me, like, if I go back to the Connerys, or no, let's do the Connerys, let's do some Roger. Like, I would say, if you said to me, okay, it's Moonraker or Live and Let Die, I would choose Live and Let Die. Is it Spy Who Loved Me versus A View to a Kill? I would choose Spy Who Loved Me. But then you know, you've got some obvious ones, but then you've got the ones that are like, okay, what's better, you know, Live and Let Die or Spy? And it's like, they're both really fucking good. But I guess you judge it on the replay value of, like, which one do I watch more out of those two? And for me, it would be Live and Let Die. So it's like, I just prefer Live and Let Die for whatever reason over Spy, or you know, whatever it might be. And I think for me with Skyfall, at the time I came out being like, damn it, you know, it was all right. I didn't come out buzzing. I didn't love it. And I think for me, it was, I wanted more of that secret organization thing to come through, which just completely vanished. And I don't know, man, that the sort of mopey Bond sort of, you know, that moment when that sort of iconic moment where Bond and Emma stood in the Scottish Highlands and they're having a little break from the drive, and she's talking about orphans and all that kind of stuff, and Bond sort of like mumbles his answers and stuff. I'm like, you know what? It's interesting to explore that, but I just don't think that's the Bond I want to see. I don't want to see Bond sort of moping around missing his parents. You know what I mean? I just see him being an absolute badass, and get that in Spectre, man. Like, look at him walking across that rooftop, dude. Like, that's the Bond I want to see on the screen, you know. And for me, a lot of it comes down to that, I guess.
Sure. It's funny you say that too, because honestly, again, you are making me kind of rethink some things. And honestly, like, I totally agree with you that by the time we got Skyfall, and like you said, he's at his childhood home, and he's this whole thing about him as a child, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember kind of feeling like, I hope the one after that, this time it's impersonal. You know, I would love just a regular plain old Bond adventure where it's not this whole big mopey, like you said, dreary. And I guess personally, I kind of felt like, well, when we got to Spectre, I felt like, well, they like you sort of saw it as being much lighter and more Bondish than I remember kind of walking away feeling like they doubled down on the childhood angst with this whole stuff about them knowing each other from as kids, and it does feel like sort of an afterthought that they could have just skipped that. In fact, I remember, I don't know if you saw, you probably did, the some of the earlier scripts that got leaked, and I felt like at one point they handled the Blofeld reveal much better, because
100%.
Right?
I'm glad you mentioned that, actually, because I remember in one of the scripts, I forget which version now, there's that whole backstory about him joining the French Foreign Legion, isn't there? There's that. Do you remember that backstory?
I don't know, actually.
There was a, you know, it's been 5 years since I read those, so I can't remember the details now, but I remember being like, oh. And I do think in some of those previous scripts, there was a point where we got a better film, and then it veered away from that. You know what I mean? It's like, they'd have stuck with that, man, that would have been so good. And so there is definitely
even just like, I remember the one that I saw, the Blofeld reveal, it wasn't that he was Oberhauser and then just changed his name to Blofeld. The one I saw it was like he kept calling himself Oberhauser, but then Bond said something like, well, you know, I wasn't the only one who was taken in by Oberhauser. You were taken in too. In fact, your real name is Ernst Stavro Blofeld. And I thought, now that's so much better, because I remember, like, later on when Bond meets M and he says, the recently deceased head of Spectre, Ernst Stavro Blofeld, it was almost like, boy, you kind of decided to play along pretty quickly, didn't you? Like, having his real name be Blofeld made much more sense.
I much prefer that. Let me ask you this, right? If, let's pretend it wasn't Spectre and it was, you know, Another Way to Die Again was the last film, and the Bond villain was somebody that was maybe Franz Oberhauser, right? They did know each other as kids, but it didn't end up having the Blofeld twist. It was just that. So it was a character Bond knew from his childhood. Maybe it was Franz Oberhauser, so there's still that sort of fatherly connection with Hans.
Mm-mm.
How would you feel about that? Is it that it's Blofeld that pisses you off the most, or is it anybody that Bond knows as a child?
That's a really good question. I think if they never mentioned Blofeld, if it was just like you said, well, put it this way, if it was somebody from his childhood and he wasn't the head of the organization, right? Mm-hmm. He was still just a cog in the bigger wheel, and they were still alluding to, like, you know, the bigger bad guy is yet to come. Probably not so bad, I guess. I mean, the connection with Silva and M in Skyfall, I think, is spot on great. Mm-hmm. I tell you what, I probably would have felt like, all right, we just kind of did this with the person from the past coming in to muck up the works. But yeah, I probably wouldn't have felt quite as bad. I think the idea, I get the idea that he is actually Blofeld, even if they didn't call him Blofeld. I think, let's say they didn't try that they didn't call it Spectre and they didn't call him Blofeld, but everything else is the same. I probably would still have a problem with the idea that this person from Bond's past became this super duper bad guy and seems to take a lot of delight in pushing Bond's buttons and killing everyone he loves. Because again, I couldn't really get my head around the idea. Okay, so your father, who you loved and you were happy with before somebody else came along and took some of the spotlight, now this other guy comes along, so you kill your father, and then Bond goes on his merry way, and then just later on you just decide to make his life miserable. Yeah. I kind of remember thinking, like, no, you push Bond off a cliff if this is your problem. You don't kill your father, you know.
Yeah, fair point. I just think that whole angle isn't very good. You know, when you have Darth Vader say, "Luke, I am your father," it's like everybody loses their mind because what an amazing twist that is. And then you just accept that Star Wars got there and did that, and you don't try the same sort of thing. You know what I mean? Because then it becomes that was such an iconic moment. It then becomes a cliche because it just is. Yeah. So and, like, to be honest, I think I lose the whole childhood connection, and I feel like you just have Blofeld be Blofeld. Yeah. And that would have made it infinitely better. And it's that sort of just ham-fisted way of trying to make it more of an emotional impact and just sort of like missing the mark a bit. Right. Again, if they had have made like so how do I feel about that? I do think it was a bad idea. Does it bother me that much? Not really. I don't watch that. Not sitting there going, "Oh, why did they do that?" You know what I mean? It doesn't give that reaction. Yeah. I'm just like, all right, it's a bit shit. Yeah. I'll get on that.
And you're absolutely right. I am kind of dorking out over. I mean, I like the perspective you're putting it in. You're basically saying that, you know, Spectre at one point was a pretty solid film, and then like maybe third, fourth, fifth rewrite, they brought in somebody who mucked up the works, and the ending they tacked on things at the end, and they don't make any sense. And that makes perfect sense to me. I get it. Like, it's the baby with the bathwater. But yeah, I mean, I'll admit, like, even like Quantum, I think is okay until they drop Mathis in the dumpster, and then suddenly, like, I'm literally taking personal offense to that, and it kind of kills it for me. So I'm kind of doing something similar here, because and again, now that I've had time, see, I think when I walked out of Spectre the first time, I was pretty lukewarm, and I can literally remember watching it literally like in the middle of the movie, and kind of feeling like asking myself, like, well, how am I liking this? Do I like this? Then the train fight came along, and I was sort of won over. Then after that, it petered out again. But it wasn't until, again, kind of a lot of subsequent viewings, and by the way, leaving us for 5 or 6 years with no new movie, so I've spent way too much time thinking about this one. Honestly, the Blofeld connection started to really irk the hell out of me, because I kept saying to myself, look, if I'm supposed to buy into the idea that Blofeld was really pulling all of Bond's strings, and he was responsible for, like, going all the way back to the death of Vesper, etc., then you have to sort of say to yourself, well, then Bond must be a pretty terrible detective, because all of these things were happening, This other guy was pulling all the strings. Bond had no clue until literally M said, here's a big fat clue. Go to that because you'll see the guy who you should have been looking for all along. And then even then, if you assume that, like, when Bond goes to the meeting, he holds up the ring, he gets let in, and Blofeld looks up and sees him, then you have to also assume that they knew he was coming, and Blofeld basically let him in to say, hey, hi, it was me, dummy. So it's like, well, that doesn't really make Bond look too smart, does it?
I guess not. And again, it's one of those things where
it's a lot of overthinking to get there. I admit
it. It is. I mean, here's another thing that just makes me scratch my head even to this day, is how when Q analyzes the ring and then all of a sudden that links him to everything, and he says like the ring is the link to everything, and I'm like, well, I don't know how that links anything to anybody personally, and I still don't understand. And I remember hearing him explain it. I think it was on the Empire podcast when they asked him about the ring, and he did have some explanation that I still was like, I don't know about that. That doesn't make sense to me. But it's one of those things.
Did every one of those people wear this ring? Is that what you're telling me? That the DNA of every person who wore it is on there?
Because their faces pop up on the computer screen, didn't they?
Right.
So again, it's one of those things. But again, at the end of the day, we all have different levels of tolerance for stuff like that, and that kind of stuff is in pretty much every Bond film. So it's like, I feel like you either let that stuff really bother you, or you just be like,
right,
let's carry on. Like, I think A View to a Kill is a good example of that, right? A View to Kill, obviously Roger is too old, right? He would have even told you that himself. And by that point, it's time to get the fresh blood in. The Pierce or the Timothy needed to step in at that point, but he didn't, right? So we do have A View to a Kill. Sure. Now, some people say it's, bottom table Bond film or whatever. Some people love it. But it exists, and it is as it is. So what do we do with that? Do we sit there and just complain about it all day and find everything that's wrong about it, or do we find the things that we love and acknowledge that every time Bond does anything remotely athletic, it's not Roger Moore anymore. It's some dude obviously in the frame who's half his age or whatever. So it's one of those things. It did happen, and it is what it is. So it's like, do you enjoy it or not? And some people would look at Spectre and be like, I just don't enjoy it. And that's fair enough. I'm the same with Die Another Day, man. This is the first time I've seen it in 18 years. I saw it twice at the cinema, never again until last week. And I'm just like, the things that are positive about it aren't positive enough to make me not worry about the bad stuff. And there's enough bad stuff in there that it's like, there's not enough good to outweigh that. And it's like, for me, when I look at, so Die Another Day, I would say positives are the car chase on the ice is all right. It's half decent. Maybe the sword fight and the idea that Bond gets tortured and held for 14 months. I'm like, that's interesting, new stuff. Bring it on. I'd like to explore more of that, please. But then everything else is so abysmal. It's like those three things don't buy it out of the pit of terribleness that I think it is. Whereas with Spectre, there's enough good stuff in there that I absolutely adore, that some funky ring being the link to everything and a sort of half-baked sort of stepbrother plot doesn't bother me that much. You know what I mean? And it's like, if that had happened in Die Another Day and Blofeld pops up in Die Another Day, I'd be like face palming left, right, and center. But when you've got that pre-title sequence, you got the Lucia Sciarra assassin sequence, you got that brilliant Spectre meeting, you got the great Octopussy style Mr. White scene, you got the train fight, you got the meteor speech, like all of that for me is like absolutely knockout top draw Bond, So it's like, I enjoy that stuff so much that I'm like, I don't mind the stepbrother thing, it never gave me that like puke rising in the back of my throat moment that it has for people. It just didn't. You know what I mean? I love all that stuff so much. What I will say is, to this day, I don't think Blofeld has ever been done right on screen. Right. So that might be a controversial thing, but like when you,
I think a lot of people would agree with that. Okay. Yeah. When
you go back to the beginning and you've got the shadowy dude sitting behind a screen or in shadow or whatever with a pussycat, and you're like, that is such a powerful thing. I always say, like, Jaws is a good example, is in the shark Jaws. When you don't see him, he's more terrifying. You know what I mean? Right. You just see the evidence that there's a shark down there when there's the rope moving or something, so you know it's the shark's pulling the rope. All those kinds of things. That's terrifying. Same with Alien. When you don't see the thing, that's the thing that shits you up the most.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Blofeld's at his most powerful. You look at Donald Pleasance, totally iconic. I mean, Dr. Evil, that's how iconic Blofeld is, that look of Blofeld. Great, awesome, absolutely iconic. And then you've got your other Blofelds, you've got your Telly Savalas, you've got your Charles Gray, and now obviously you've got your Christoph Waltz. And it's like, they're all good in their own way, but I don't think that anybody's really nailed it. It's a funny one. So, for example, right, when you look at Blofeld's description in the books, it says this. I've prepared this as well. I've come prepared today. As you blah blah blah. Blofeld is described physically as a massive man weighing roughly 280 pounds. That's 20 stone for my British padres. Who had previously been a champion amateur weightlifter in his youth before becoming obese in middle age. He has black crew-cut hair, black eyes similar to those of Benito Mussolini, heavy eyelashes, a thin mouth, and long pointed hands and feet. He has violet-scented breath from chewing flavored cashews. I don't know, it's spelled C-A-C-H-O-U-S, breath mints. A habit he adopts whenever he must deliver bad news. A meticulous planner of formidable intellect. He seems to be without conscience but not necessarily insane, and is motivated solely by financial gain. Blofeld's lifestyle is described in one chapter in Thunderball. For the rest, he didn't smoke or drink, and he had never been known to sleep with a member of either sex. He didn't even eat very much. So it's like, that's intriguing, isn't it? Because we've never seen that Blofeld remotely. Like maybe a little hint in Telly Savalas,
right?
Because he's more physically imposing, but the screen Blofeld is this weedy little skinny dude, isn't it? It's not. So I would be intrigued, especially the obese side of things. Like you could almost see him in the Fioros only wheelchair being this massive dude. Like
right.
Remember like the Kingpin in the Spider-Man comics and stuff. Kind of style. That's almost like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm pulling all that off Wikipedia. So if none of that's accurate, then you can blame Wikipedia, not me.
No, I tell you what. I mean, I've actually said the same thing too. And here's a little funny bit of. I remember kind of walking out of the Spectre and feeling like, because I did feel that. I mean, Christoph Waltz is great. He's a great actor, and if you put him in a Tarantino movie, he's terrifying. But I think that's because it's a Tarantino movie. Because if you've ever seen one, you know that at any moment something awful can happen. So that whole scene, like in the beginning of Inglourious Bastards, when he's talking to the guy at the table, and it's chilling because at any minute he could go off, right? But in a Bond film, that's not what you're gonna get. You'll get like Bond hanging over a pool of piranhas. So I don't know if Christoph Waltz really worked in this one, but ironically, I did say to myself, who really should have been Blofeld in this? Dave Bautista. I kind of feel like as good as he is as Hinks, and I think he's probably one of the highlights of the film, I think him, because again, and I probably would not have thought so back then, but after seeing him in other films like Guardians of the Galaxy, I could actually see him sitting in that chair in the dark as Blofeld.
That is an interesting thought, because that totally matches the description I just read, doesn't it? Like
right?
I would never look at him in a million years and say, "Oh, that guy should be Blofeld," because I'm looking for a different Blofeld now. I've been trained over all the movies to think of like an older, skinny, shorter, smaller physically dude. But if you were to do Fleming's Blofeld as described there, then that is it, isn't it? Really, that is 100% it.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I had a memory implanted in my brain that I think it was from Austin Powers. I was under the impression that Blofeld was Belgian, because Dr. Evil says it's how we drink it in Belgium. It's called a Belgian dip, right? Looking at Blofeld's backstory, it says he was born to blah, 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 blah. He was born in Germany to a Polish father and a Greek mother. So I don't know where the Belgian thing came from. I think that was just those weird implanted memories where you remember things differently. So that's an interesting thing, I suppose. How do we react to that as fans, though? Because we're expecting a Christoph Waltz type, aren't we, when it comes to Blofeld? If they had
I don't know if we are, because I kind of felt like Christoph Waltz was a little bit of like, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. That I think that, I mean, first of all, the bald Blofeld is sort of what we've come to between Donald Pleasance, Telly, and even the For Your Eyes Only guy who we only see from the back, etc. I don't know. I kind of felt like if you shave off Dave Bautista's hair, which he's already done in other films, you kind of got it. So
it's an interesting point. Yeah, that is. I mean, that is the Fleming description. So I just don't know whether people would accept that based on what we've been trained over the years.
Yeah.
Of what the film Blofeld is.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting little experiment. Tell me this: what do you think about the scar across the eye in Spectre? Did you like that or did you not like it?
What was funny to me about that was that it felt like, again, kind of a last minute effort to draw some connections and tap on the fan service, which is fine. Trust me, I'm not too proud to giggle when I see fan service. Like even the cat showing up, I kind of was like, all right, here we go. We're starting to get into the more, classic Blofeld stuff.
Did you like how they handled that? Because that was we never got the moment in the pointy chair of him stroking the cat on his lap. It was just like a cat was there.
Right. Yeah.
So I thought they handled that part quite well without going full Dr. Evil.
Yeah. I agree with that. It was a nod, like a wink to the people who would know it, and if you don't know it, whatever. See, the scar thing to me was, I almost felt like they're trying very hard to keep this very grounded and not get Dr. Evil-ish. But then I thought, but then they opted for the one thing that is very Dr. Evil. And frankly, it always bugged me that the fact that Blofeld, as smart as he is and seems to know everything, doesn't think to take away James Bond's watch. And like the fact that she was able to throw it and he looks down like, huh? And it blows up in his face.
So he does have history with that, man, because when Bond asked for a smoke and you only live twice, he's like, yeah, go on then. That was
right. Yeah. But I tell you what, I mean, I totally hear. I think you're making great points, and I am, like, again, sort of laughing at myself saying, like you said, for a series that is almost founded on the idea, like you said, Helga Brandt takes him up in the plane just to jump out and leave him there. I mean, again, the series is known for, well, I'll put him in an easily escapable thing and I'll walk away and pretend that everything is taken care of. Right, to sort of nitpick these funny little things. But and by the way, one of the things I wanted to mention that you kind of alluded to, I also do like the imagery that I'm pretty sure was intentional. I thought it was very clever how you got a boardroom scene, you got a research center up in the Alps, and then you got the volcano. Like, I kind of felt like, assuming that was intentional, you had nice nods to all of the other Blofeld iconic moments, and I thought that was pretty clever.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, I was. If I think back through the film, and I'm looking at my notes here again, and I start at the very beginning and I go through the whole thing, I think the first 2 hours of Spectre is top draw, and I love all of it. The one thing that comes to mind is like, where's the weak point in that? Is obviously the car chase. It's not like, if you look at the Quantum car chase, editing aside, that's like a breakneck, frantic chase that you're like edge of the seat stuff,
Yeah.
The car chase in Spectre is obviously a bit underwhelming. I've always thought, though, it serves a bit of a different purpose because the plot is moving forward at that point, isn't it? He's on the phone to Moneypenny and that whole stuff is happening. And I do remember a story that I think it might have been the Jag was like a prototype that was basically held together by string almost, and like the slightest hit and it would have fallen apart completely, so they couldn't go all out. I don't know whether that's a bad excuse and whether the car chase was always going to be that anyway. Or
I also saw something else. Somebody just sent me something yesterday. It was an old article saying that Rome would not let them do a full-blown car chase in the middle of the city. Yeah. So that might have also hampered them.
Well, that's it then. So I kind of understand why that was an underwhelming car chase, but at the same time I'm like, well, it's not like that was a huge set piece moment. The plot was moving forward in there. It wasn't like it was just a pointless chase for the sake of it. It was moving the plot forward. So I'm not that bothered by it. But yeah, dude, everything up until that point, I'm like, all the set pieces and stuff, I absolutely adore it, and I think it's great. And I do think it's just that moment when he gets out of the torture chair, and I think it will all be wrapped up and solved with what you told me about putting the train fight at the end, and then just having a big crater base fight with, all the MI6 crew showing up in matching overalls and against all of Blofeld's minions. Because if anything, that crater base feels woefully underpopulated as well, doesn't it? It's like when they go into that room with all the screens in, it's like there's all the minions in there, and that feels good to me. That feels very old school Connery.
Sure.
Anywhere else in the base, there's not a soul in there apart from that one butler dude.
Yeah.
To me, I feel like I wanted to see Bond really in the lion's den there, surrounded by so many enemies,
Right.
So I think that's how you solve it, man. Yeah. Cut off that last half an hour, replace it with a crater base battle, train fight, and then Blofeld disappears. There's no arresting Blofeld. Yeah. It's like where they go and look for the body, they can't find it, and it's that's the way to do it.
I'm with you 100%, and I'll say this. I mean, I guess we'll sort of sum up. I'm much happier going into these sort of discussions where, again, I'm the one who doesn't like it, and I want to be convinced. And I think you successfully did kind of give me a lot more to like about it than I took away from your not liking it. So I'm kind of pleased with that. And I think you've made a lot of very good points.
Well, thank you very much, man. I tell you what, this is a good example for the for toxic fandom and all its points of when you have two people who are on the other side of the fence having a constructive conversation about something that feel completely differently about it. So that's a good thing, man. Let that 100%. Be a lesson to all you toxic people out there.
Totally agree with that, brother. Totally agree with you there. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you so much, brother. This was great. And what do you got going on over at James Bond Radio these days? I know you're doing Die Another Day, and I'm loving it.
Yeah, well, it genuinely is a struggle for me, man, because it's Die Another Day. As we're recording this, episode 2 is going to be going out tomorrow, and then episode 3 the following week, and then we have our sort of 90-second review episodes where all the listeners phone in with their reviews, and we just sync them all together to get, all the listeners can have their say as well about it. So for me, it's a tricky one because I really, if anything, a lot of people have said to me over the years, when you finally do revisit Die Another Day, I bet you it's not going to be as bad as you think, and you're going to find things that you like about it. And having revisited it, like, if anything, it's worse than I remember it. And I'm so genuinely, I'm struggling to get through this because I do like to look at spend my time focused on the stuff that I love rather than going deep in the weeds of negativity. Sure. But I can't do that with Die Another Day because for me, it's that trigger for me where I'm just like, there's so much I really can't get on board with this one that there's just not enough for me to work with. So it really is a struggle. For some reason, Die Another Day Part 1 was probably our most popular episode we've ever made. Yeah. People seem to love it, but yeah, it's for me, it really is a struggle, man, because I do love Bond, and to sort of criticize it as much as I am with Die Another Day, it's not a good feeling. But hey, people seem to find that entertaining for some reason. So there we go.
But like you said, I mean, that's kind of the beauty of the Bond fan community. I mean, we love some, we dislike others, but we can all talk. I mean, if it wasn't for that, what would we talk about? If we all sat around all day going like, "Hey, did you see that movie? Yeah, it was awesome."
Yeah,
that's it. We gotta kind of break it up a little bit, and
of course, and there are those moments like you'll struggle to find anybody that doesn't like Casino Royale, or at least even if it's not their favorite, to not appreciate what a good film it is, and then you've got people that love Roger and think Moonraker is the business, and people who think Moonraker is abysmal, and so on, and that is truly the beauty of it, because there is something to be appreciated about all of them. Sure. The only thing I can find that I appreciate about Die Another Day is the score at this point.
Okay.
but yeah, it's what keeps it interesting. Absolutely, like you say.
Yeah.
How have the other people on this Spectre defending Spectre thing fared? Have we had many supporters in my camp, or is it?
Honestly, so far I'm seeing more people doing this, but yeah. Yeah. But I do think your appreciation is infectious, and I really do. I'm not just saying this. I really do feel like the next time I watch Spectre, I'll probably do it with a little different eyes and be able to sort of take in, some of the better
that's something with JBR when we watch the films. Like, so I when we first started the podcast, I sort of said I'm not gonna rewatch any of the films we're about to review within the next year or two, so I can have a bit of a break from them and then come at them with fresh eyes. And then what I try to do every time is be like, okay, let's ignore the baggage, let's ignore what came before or what came after, and let's just go in and pretend like this is its own film and see how that makes you feel. You know what I mean? And you do definitely pick up on things that you would never notice before and things like that. And just in the way it makes you feel, really. Sometimes it's like there is definitely trying to watch things from different perspectives. But again, I am probably the biggest hypocrite you're ever talking to in the world, because there ain't no other angle I can look at Die Another Day with that changes my opinion in any way, shape, or form.
That's funny. I tell you what, I wish I could be the guy to tell you that all the good things about it, but I can't really either. But there's a couple little things, I guess. But so how about this? Spectre on a scale of 1 to 10. I mean, and again, not just comparing it to movies in general, but like you and I have sort of used the the one with the least fingerprints, just in terms of like where it sits on your shelf of the Bond films.
All right. I always find that a very, very difficult thing to do in the grand scheme of things, because I know what's at the very top and I know what's at the very bottom. And then in the middle ranges, higher and lower, I find it very difficult because there's so many of them. What I will do is I'll tell you in terms of Daniel, my rankings at the moment would go Casino number 1, Spectre number 2, Skyfall 3, Quantum 4. But I haven't seen Quantum in many a moon, because that's going to be coming up reasonably soon for us. So that might change. The lower two might change when I revisit. And there's a small but strong crowd of Quantum lovers out there.
There is, isn't there?
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how that one makes me feel. But yeah, out of the Daniel, I tell you what, dude. What I will say is, if I feel like I'm going to watch Daniel, I will probably be putting Spectre on more than any others at this point. Not because I think it's better than Casino, because I don't, but because I've seen Casino so many times in recent years that it's like I need to just chill out a little bit because I'm going to overcook it. So if I feel in the mood for a Daniel, it's more likely going to be Spectre that I put on over any others. Yeah.
That's interesting. It's funny you say that, because I feel like if I ask myself the same question, Casino would probably be the one that if I had a friend over who's never seen any of the Bonds, and I'm picking one of the Craigs to show, it's definitely going to be Casino.
It's the one, yeah.
But I feel like, that's a different question than like if I was just sitting by myself and just want to pop one on.
Yeah.
I would probably lean towards Skyfall, just because, again, I just sort of love the visual look of the film.
Yeah.
But but that's an interesting question.
Yeah. In the grand scheme of things, I don't know, because there's so many, so for me, Majesties and Casino are pretty much in joint first place. After that, man, I could make so many arguments for what comes in number 2 even, and still not anywhere. So I can't tell you whether it's number 6 or whether it's number 15 or what. I just because you could then throw another film at me which I adore, and I'm like, damn it, that deserves to be higher, and I'll just be here all day. So yeah.
It is a weirdly tricky thing when you sit and try to, like, again, when I first started doing the review series, I literally, because I wanted to try to the best I could make sure I didn't contradict myself. So I remember early on literally making a list of all the films and literally trying to put them in order. But it's like it's an ever moving thing. Like sometimes you look at it and you're like, well, okay, I like this one better than this, but it's like, but do I like it better than that one? Like, this one was so, like, all of a sudden you're like, but it's like such an apples to oranges sort of
Well, that is absolutely the problem. And I think the only way you can really do it, I don't think you can accurately do the list of 1 to 24 or 25. I don't think that's actually possible, because it's only ever in that moment that you're in, and it's like you are the same thing the next day and you're like, shit, actually, I do prefer For Your Eyes Only to, Moonraker or whatever. So I think the only way that you do it with some level of accuracy is you do it by actor. And you go, okay, what's my number 1 Connery? What's my number 1 Roger?
Right, yes.
Number 2 Pierce? Things like that. Then you've got more of an idea, I think, because like they stay pretty constant. But like, how do you rate Goldfinger versus From Russia with Love or Majesties? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
they're brilliant. So it's like, how do you do that? Or even, how do you rate oh God, GoldenEye versus.
Right.
Find the other one. You know what I mean? GoldenEye
Yeah.
versus Living Daylights. There's a
Yeah.
good example. Like they're
Sure.
both great. You know, so it's like,
Yeah.
which one wins? I don't
Yeah.
know. I can't tell
And
you.
it's interesting too because again, like our top two are exactly the same. Where I do that same thing with Honor Majesties and Casino, where they're just sitting there next to each other. Some days maybe one might be a little higher than the other, but like how do you even take a film that was done in 2006 and compare it, to a film that came out in 1969 with the same I can't judge this one the same way I judge this one. I mean, it's just not a fair comparison.
Yeah, and do you know, Chris to me recently, he's been introducing his lady to Bond, and they're sort of drawing him out of the hat, so they're not watching him in order. It's like, okay, today we're watching this film, and whatever comes out that is the one. And he's juggled some of his favorites around, and I think I remember him saying he's always been a massive Octopussy fan, and he said reviewing that recently, he rates Moonraker over Octopussy, which was a big surprise to me.
Wow.
And I think he was previously the same as me, where it was Majesty's forward by like half an inch with Casino in number 2, but he was firmly that Casino's number 1 now. And also, when you show Bond to people, you almost get a universally positive reaction from Casino. It's like the film where there's something for everybody, and especially if it's a lady who's not, is not a Bond fan.
Yeah.
And that's because there's something in there for them with the romance. You've got Vesper that they lock onto and all that kind of stuff.
Big time.
That's the one, dude. I think, man, if you give it, I mean, it's already 14 years old, which I can't quite believe, but you give it another 10 years when we've probably got one more Bond film. And you look back after a bit more time's passed, I do think Casino is probably going to be the best. It's just that good.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I feel, and it's funny because I feel like, Honor Majesty's has always been for years and years my favorite, and I feel like Casino just kind of went bump, like just came right up to it as far as being, and it was almost like I resisted for so long because I'm like, I can't let this young whippersnapper take over the spot that was done in the 60s. Like I have to, and I at some point I had to relent, and I look at Casino, I'm like, this film is flawless. I mean the whole tone of Casino. See, it's interesting because I feel like Martin Campbell, like both of his films, like GoldenEye is great, but they're so different from each other. Like GoldenEye is great, Casino is great, but they're not similar. But one thing I do notice is that there's sort of almost a hands-off view of Bond, where we're kind of almost taking ourselves out of the Bond film a little bit to sort of look at it from a different angle. And I sort of feel like that's why you sort of see a different spin on a lot of the classic tropes. Like both of these films have moments where, the flirting with Moneypenny and GoldenEye, it's turned upside down a little bit. And Casino has a lot of that where it's like, well, that was quite a funny line, or, he's seducing the woman for information, but like a lot of those sort of classic tropes that were done just a little differently. And it's almost like I kind of love that because it sort of allows you to kind of rediscover James Bond.
Well,
you know what I mean? It's one of the reasons why I think Casino is such a great movie to introduce somebody to, because like it's such a perfect introduction to the things that make Bond unique.
100%. You hit the nail on the head there. I think it's when you have that thing of I mean, you described 2 perfect films to describe that. When you look at, do you want it shaken or stirred? Do I look like I'd give a damn? You know what I mean? Right. You have that stuff. You have the moment after he comes back from being poisoned, and he's like, "That last hand nearly killed me."
Yes.
It's such a classic Bond quip, but it's so underplayed, and it's not like he's firing out Saved by the Bell style quips left, right, and center. You know what I mean? It's just that one. You know what I mean? And it's and likewise with the GoldenEye Moneypenny scene, where she's like, "I don't come down here dressed up just to impress James Bond," and all that kind of stuff. And he's still flirting with her. He's still kind of giving it the large one,
Right.
She's having none of it, and that's such a beautiful way for a new Bond to come in, new times, new generation, sexist, misogynist dinosaur, all that stuff, man. That M scene, dude, is incredible. I think that's up there with it's tough for me to say. It's up there with the best of them. It might be the best one. I don't know, because she so puts him in his place. I love Bernard Lee, though, man. You just can't beat that, really, I suppose. So I'm talking myself out of it, even one sentence after I've said it.
Yeah.
But all of those things yeah, it's. Oh, dude, we could go on all day about this, couldn't we?
We absolutely can. No, you're absolutely right. And then, like I said, this is the beauty of it, because we could just talk about the stuff. And I love when you're saying like Judi Dench, but Bernard Lee. It's not even like a matter of one better or worse than the other. It's like this one's good, but this was even gooder. You know what I mean? Like it just gets better and better. There's so much good stuff to talk about.
I mean, that GoldenEye M scene, man, the way with the setup to it as well, being that new thing that, you know, you get Zukovsky say, I hear the new M's a lady, and there's that whole ooh thing.
Yeah.
And you've got that schoolboy scene before where they're looking at the satellite footage and Tanner calls her the evil queen of numbers, and they're like, oh, she's right behind you. And it's like proper schoolboy, like the teachers just walks in the room vibe. Yeah. And then, you know, there's all that stuff where he sits down and he says, your predecessor kept some cognac in there. And she's like, I prefer bourbon, thank you. And it's like, all right. And she knows exactly what she's doing. And she stares him straight in the eye, calls him a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, relic of the Cold War, tears him down a peg or two. And he's like proper put in his place. And then just that little glimmer at the end when he's walking out the door and she says, come back alive, you know, and there's that little bit of warmth that you needed. She's not just a nasty bitch. She's like, she's in charge. She's the boss. She's put him in his place, but you just get that little bit of warmth. Absolute perfection, man. Love that
totally.
Scene. Yeah,
absolutely. Brother, like you said, I could do this all day, but I gotta.
Oh, man. One of these days, man, I'm going to wake up and you're going to say, you know what? I've completely rethought about Spectre.
It's possible. It is possible.
I'm over to the dark side, bro. I'll be waiting for you.
All right, man. Tom, thank you so much. Thank you, brother. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, man.
Anytime. What's up, guys? Thank you, Tom. That was pretty cool. Hope you enjoyed that one. So I was watching the chats out of the corner of my eye. Brendan Sheehy, thank you so much for the super chat, brother. And he said, did you see Matador? Pierce Brosnan seems to have a blast shedding the shackles of Bond and plays an emotionally arrested sleazeball. I did see it, but it was a long time ago. In fact, there was actually a few Brosnan movies right around that time that I liked. Like I haven't seen the Matador in a while, but I do remember it being pretty good. There was by the way, if you guys haven't seen the The Foreigner, it's called, with Jackie Chan, boy is that good. There was another I wanted to mention too. Kevin Dorn asked, where'd it go? Oh crap. He mentioned another podcast which was good. Crap, now I lost it. There's a couple guys who have been doing these Bond reviews of all the films, and they're going in order, and they're doing some good stuff. Where did that go? Damn it, Kevin Dorn, remind me what those guys are called. There's two guys who do really interesting reviews. They get into some really interesting detail, but it's a lot of fun. It's more just sort of a glorified podcast. Oh, From Rewatch with Love, it's called. Do a search for from Rewatch with Love, they're called. It's a bigger channel, but that's what they're calling these. They're really good. It's good stuff. And by the way, the Bond Bulletin has been doing watch-alongs, and they have been really good as well. Really good stuff. He does really, really good quality videos. I watch some of his stuff sometimes, and I'm like, man, I wish I thought of that first. All right, real quick. So let's check out the poll again. It's really kind of leveled out. As of right now, 62 people have chimed in, and it's kind of gotten a little more neck and neck. 45% like it, 55% not so much. But before, I think it was almost like 80-20. So not so bad. So Spectre's kind of winning. Tom is, I guess, convincing some people that this is actually pretty good. So with that in mind, I got another friend who's waiting in the wings. Kyle, what's going on, brother? Easy smiles and expensive watches. How are you, partner?
It's been a long time, and finally, here we are. What took you so long?
What took you so long? Dude, I see that you are not only drinking the part, but dressed the part.
I never do anything half-assed, so I'm all themed around Spectre tonight. Shoulder holster and Macallan 18, which is favored by Bond in this movie.
Dude, nicely done. Well played, my friend.
I try.
Cheers, brother. Kyle's here, so I gotta crack a beer in honor of Kyle.
And it is one of my favorites, so way to keep it in-house.
All right, brother, let's do it. So Spectre, then let me ask you, are you kind of like what I asked Tom? Are you a by the way, how's my is the audio good? I don't see anybody yelling at me about audio, so I guess we're good. Hey Lorenzo, what's going on, brother? Good to see Lorenzo. And by the way, I saw the Bond Armory. Hope you're feeling better, partner. You still hopped up on goofballs? Your painkillers?
Yeah, I can put some ice on that head.
Put a little butter on that.
Windex.
There you go. So, all right. So, Kyle. So let me ask you: when we're talking about Spectre, and you're obviously going to play defense? You know, I was very critical of Spectre. Do you think Spectre's just kind of not as bad as people say, or would you call yourself like a full-blown fan of Spectre?
A little bit of both. I am a fan. I like this movie. Every time I watch it, I have fun. I find myself enjoying the movie. It's not dour. I think the tone is balanced. The humor works for me. I have a good time every time I watch it.
Okay. All right. Let me have it. So tell me why Spectre is a good movie.
All right. Well, I'll start with telling you what I don't like about it, so we can just get that right out of the way. I don't think anybody likes the conceit of Blofeld, Franz Oberhauser, the Brofeld plotline. Nobody likes that. It's incredibly ham-fisted to try and get Blofeld into the plots of the last three movies, and I feel like the whole reveal of Blofeld is mishandled. It's kind of like they didn't learn their lesson from Skyfall with, Eve. It's totally not Miss Moneypenny. Yeah. We swear. Oh, by the way, surprise, she's Miss Moneypenny. And you don't cast Christoph Waltz in a movie called Spectre and expect us to think that he's anybody other than Blofeld.
Totally agree.
So there's that. Connecting the Craig films in like a Marvel cinematic universe sort of way doesn't work. And they would have been better off just going along with, okay, here is Spectre, and this is a new plot line, a new threat, and James Bond has to contend with that. So, okay, all of that said, it's fun. I think finally we get to see Daniel Craig play James Bond, as opposed to a guy who just happens to be named James Bond. I mean, he's cool. He's at the top of his game. He's moving kind of like, almost like Sean Connery, that panther-like walk that Sean Connery has. Daniel Craig has it now. He's got his confidence. He has his coolness. A lot of times I watch these movies, I ask myself, do I want to be James Bond in this movie? And I don't feel that way about Quantum or Skyfall. But in Spectre, I want to be this James Bond. He does it. Make James Bond cool again.
See, it's funny. I'm kind of mixed on that. I totally hear you. There was a little bit of a change that you see in certain spots, and honestly, I don't know if it's for the better or for the worse. I can't tell if it's like, am I being overly critical of, like basically I'm saying like maybe I've been conditioned to accept the Daniel Craig version of Bond, that now this sort of return to funnier bits, etc., maybe it didn't work for me because I was just so used to what I was getting up until that point. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think at the end of every Craig film, it's kind of, we've been promised, like, okay, from this point forward, now you're going to get the James Bond you know and love. End of Casino Royale, he shoots Mr. White. The name's Bond, James Bond. Okay, we saw this origin story. I'm all for that. And at the end, we think, okay, he's a fully formed James Bond. But that's not the case when we get to Quantum of Solace. Quantum of Solace, he's still grieving and broody. And at the end, throws the necklace in the snow. I never left. Now I'm James Bond.
Yeah.
Then we get to Skyfall. And he has to, the whole tagline of Skyfall was James Bond has to learn how to be James Bond again. Like, well, wait a second. We just saw that in the last 2 movies. It was so refreshing just to see Bond come out of the gate like, look, I'm the coolest guy here. I'm on this. I can complete this mission, on my own successfully, unlike the prior couple of films.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't come at Tom said, "Come at me, bro." I thought that was hysterical. So come at me, bro. Give me tell me give me your what's the best parts of Spectre for you?
My favorite scene is right after he ejects himself out of the Aston Martin and lands on the ground, pops the parachute, buttons his jacket, and just says, "Good evening." And I feel like that's the kind of element that's been missing from James Bond, just like that fun aspect. And I don't mean clown suit silly, but just something that shows that he's enjoying himself. This is a cool character. He should be acting that way.
See, that's funny you say that, because Tom mentioned the same scene, frankly, and I kind of didn't even really make much of it, but I had very mixed feelings with that scene. First of all, I kind of felt like, first of all, the for whatever reason, the car chase is really dull, to the point where I kind of have even trouble calling it a car chase. Like it's 2 cars following each other for sure, but like when you get to the part where, first of all, if Bond can have a conversation with Moneypenny while he's in a car chase, then if he's not very excited, why should I be excited? Like, it's not a very exciting car chase. Then there's that whole bit where Hinks's car comes up next to Bond's, and they kind of both look at each other, and Bond is like, "All right, hold on a second," and he does something, and he goes the other way. And I remember thinking, like, well, if Hinks just caught him, and he's not going to drive him off the road, he's not going to do, well, then what's the stakes here at all? Like, there's no big stakes. So honestly, I think by the time we get to Bond on the in the canal, whatever you call it, and he does the ejector seat part, I'm kind of saying to myself, well, you just sank a how many $1 million car, and I'm kind of not even really getting what why. That guy was behind you, but again, he obviously doesn't even want to dent his car by crashing into yours, so what's the big peril here that you had to escape and ditch the car? So I guess I kind of had sort of mixed feelings about it, and I feel like maybe if the whole thing was a little more exciting, I could have got a little more, excited by that parachute scene. I mean, seriously, like, we haven't had a scene where Bond actually uses the ejector seat for a long time. So it should have really been, like you said, a great Bond moment. But I guess it kind of missed it for me.
I mean, I'll agree with you. I think the car chase needs a stunt. It's missing something, a roll, a flip,
right?
Something like that. But I think it's actually kind of cool how we see this gadget-laden Aston Martin, which we've seen in how many films before, but this time they do it in a little bit different way. It doesn't have any bullets. The oil slick isn't ready yet, and that's kind of an interesting. Q hasn't finished building this thing yet, and that's something we've never seen before.
It was an interesting touch that he had the kind of the crummy little switchboard on it.
Exactly, like it's almost like this is the prototype
being held together with like electrical tape or something. Yeah.
Right. Not perfected yet, as Connery would have said.
Yeah. Okay. So what else? Give me another scene that's really good. I can think of a couple, but tell me.
How about the Lucia Sciarra scene? I mean, that's where Bond, he's seductive, he's deadly, he's precise. Yeah. Once again, it's James Bond being James Bond. Like, this is the kind of character that I grew up watching, and it was such a refreshing change to see him come back again. He's well put together. He's at the top of his game. In 2 seconds, he's got those guys down on the floor, and then he's pouring champagne and kissing the girl. Welcome back, James Bond.
Listen, I'll totally. The part when she walks in and she pours herself a drink and is walking through the apartment, and you see the figures behind her. that is, I mean, that is perfection. I will absolutely positively give you that one. I felt, what was interesting to me was like, I felt like it was, not only is it classic James Bond, classic spy, great mood, but it also just felt Italian, if that makes any sense. Like, I felt like that whole vibe kind of had like an interesting, I mean, there's obviously music playing, but just even the kind of, you know what I mean? Like, it was a little gloomy, little deep. So yeah, that was spot on, perfect. And then the two guys drop, and then you see Bond walking into the frame. That's perfect. The dialogue that comes after that was okay, and I kind of felt like this is one of the big issues I have. Like, you could really feel the difference. Like, Casino had great dialogue, not so much in Quantum. Then Skyfall, we got it back, and then not so much in this one. I felt like there's, I mean, and we could kind of get into the scripts, the versions of the scripts that were tossed around, you know, and why maybe the dialogue wasn't so great. But I just kind of felt like it was getting too quippy. Like there's, you know, like in Casino, that last hand nearly killed me. It's quippy, but it's not overly quippy, as opposed to, you know, some of them that kind of just get silly. We're kind of getting a little too quippy in that scene again. So, not perfect, but that's not a scene I'll take issue with. I felt like that's pretty spot on.
And I like my Bond quippy. I mean, I don't think he should cross the line, but I do like every once in a while. He's a cocky guy. Yeah. He's gotta throw that out there to break the tension. That's his personality.
Sure. No, big time. I'll give you that one. What's Universal Export says the train scene was awesome, and I have to absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, I love the train scene, and anytime Bond is on a train, that's always going to be a classic. And it reminds me of the fight between Bond and Jaws in Spy Who Loved Me.
Yes, absolutely. I'll tell you this, by the way, and I threw this at Tom. I think a big improvement would have been had, like, I mean, in terms of what I would do differently to sort of tweak the film to make it better. I kind of sort of agreed that we, you know, the escape from the Spectre headquarters, that should have been like a full-blown, like, the cavalry comes in and there's an assault on the base. Like, that to me,
I love when they do that. That's always great.
Like, Bond shooting his way out and blowing the place up with one bullet. It obviously was, the writers are trying to figure out how to end this, and how are we going to get him out of here? And they just do something real quick and we're done. The other thing I think that would have really improved it would have been if you took that train sequence and moved it to the end as kind of like one of those sort of tag scenes like they do in some of the earlier films.
Live and Let Die.
There you go. You know,
a classic example, also on a train.
You got it. Like,
and I'll tell you how I would have changed the breakout scene, and it's even simpler than that. Have Madeline Swan pick up the gun. She's already shown us she knows how to fire a gun. Instead of Bond shooting his way out, I mean, he should be dazed and woozy after being tortured. Give her the gun.
Right, yes.
Just one tiny little tweak, and it would have done away with that whole complaint.
That's a great, yeah, I totally agree with you there. That absolutely positively would have worked, because you're absolutely correct. I mean, they made the point to show that she knew her way around guns. So, yeah, I think there's actually, I mean, there's a couple moments in this film where I kind of feel like that is sort of the big problem, is that, like, there's a lot of missed opportunities, and that's probably a good example of one. I'll tell you another one. Here's a theory I'll throw at you just to sort of keep it interesting. The you know when Bond calls Moneypenny and she's got a guy in her apartment?
Uh-huh.
I suspect that an earlier draft of the script, and they probably got cold feet and decided not to do this, but they had already shot it. I wonder if that was supposed to be C in her bed.
Ooh, I like that theory.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason why it couldn't be, and that would explain how he's watching Miss Moneypenny and recorded their phone call.
Exactly. That's sort of where, yeah, that was kind of where this came from, because I said to myself, like, they went to the point they put the effort in to show that she had a guy in her bed, right? And it's almost like that's real random. Like, why would you write that in there? It's one thing to catch her home in her pajamas and looking through the fridge, weird, right? So why do that? And I kind of felt like, well, maybe that's the point, because again, they go to the trouble of him getting her a phone so he can speak to her in private. And then later on, C plays a recording of that specific conversation with her on the phone. And I remember thinking, but that's kind of, like, again, why did you go to the trouble to do these things, take these steps, and show that he can just magically hear conversations? And then I thought later, there's a scene where, M and him are bumping into each other, and M and C bump into each other in a hallway after a meeting, and he says, "You're a cocky little SOB." And then all of a sudden, like, Moneypenny walks past him and gives him, like, this skunk eye as she's walking past. And I didn't think much of it, but then the more I thought about it, like, what if that, maybe all of these things are there for a reason. Because I kind of feel like, particularly in a movie that's not well written, you'll see things, like nothing is an accident. Like, these things are there for a reason. So, I don't know, maybe.
I like that theory, and I'm going to watch it that way from now on. I think I'm going to go into watching Spectre with thinking C is Miss Moneypenny's nefarious boyfriend. I like that idea.
Some people are kind of agreeing. I think, like somebody said, I thought it was C the moment I saw it in the theaters. Spy, DRY, Unlimited.
I've always kind of read it as sort of like a takeoff on that line in GoldenEye when she tells Bond that she was on a date and then got called into work.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And this is like a more modernized, a little bit more involved look at that. Miss Moneypenny does have a personal life.
Right, yeah. No, it is true. And I think that's part of it as well, to sort of show, like, okay, this ain't your granddaddy's Moneypenny. She doesn't sit around pining for James Bond all the time. So, I mean, that makes some sense. This is it. And
I appreciate that. I think Spectre actually gets characters right. And that's where it works for me. I mean, I think they get the character of James Bond right for the first time since Casino. I think they get the character of Miss Moneypenny right. I think Hinks is the best henchman we've seen since probably Mayday. And I think that Madeline Swan is a good character. I think she's independent, she's intelligent, she's game for whatever. She wants to be part of the adventure. She's not at all a shrinking violet, so I really appreciate that. I think they get characters right here.
By the way, Universal Export says I think it was the Brosnan film After the Sunset that Naomi Harris was also in that as well. I forgot that she was in there. Yeah, you're totally right. And actually, After the Sunset, you ever see that movie, Kyle?
Yeah, I like that
I've
movie.
always said to myself, I said, I'll bet you this originally was a sequel to the Thomas Crown Affair. I feel like it totally works that way.
Absolutely.
Like it easily could have been a sequel to that movie.
It shares a lot of DNA. I think they're very much of a similar attitude.
Yeah. It's almost like, seriously, it kind of works pretty well that way. The Bond Armory says, as he puts on his tinfoil hat, any thoughts on the fan theory that everything after Blofeld's torture scene is a figment of Bond's imagination? Maybe including No Time to Die.
I've seen it. I've read it. I don't love it, but I mean, I can understand why people would, because it would explain away the another one of my negatives of this movie is the Die Hard with a Vengeance ending, that Bond can just shoot down a helicopter with a handgun. Right. However, you bring up the Bond Armory, he's actually got a good workaround for that. He explains that the Spectre handgun that Bond grabs from a henchman can't do the job, but his PPK can because he's got special Q-branch ammunition. So watching it that way makes it a little bit more easy to swallow.
I tell you what, that scene there, well, first of all, I've always, I mean, obviously it's kind of tongue-in-cheek as I'm saying. I love that theory. I know it's not canon. I know it's just the writing is the writing. But I do feel that theory just, in so many ways, is so perfect because it's everything after that moment just gets so clunky. I mean, even from the part where, honestly, Blofeld knows everything about everything and doesn't think to take away James Bond's watch, so it's like, really, So yeah, everything from there going forward is just so weird and awkward. The part where he shoots down the helicopter, I remember kind of feeling like it's a pretty piss poor climax, frankly. In fact, honestly, if you just did an assault on the Spectre lair, Blofeld escapes, like that could have been your ending, and then throw on the tag scene with Bond and Hanks in the train. All of that London stuff to me doesn't work, and it almost felt like a last minute rewrite where somebody said, well, that everything in Skyfall was so great. He was in London, and all the other people had stuff to do, so they kind of worked all that in, and I'm like, yeah, nah, it doesn't work. It's so, I mean, even down to her being tied up, like it's so Penelope Pit Stop, like it's just kind of like, I tied your girlfriend to the train tracks, like come on, yeah, it's all really weak, but now I forget where I was going with this. Oh, so yeah, there's the part where he actually shoots down the helicopter. I remember saying to myself, it's as lame as this is, I wouldn't even really give it that much. I mean, it's highly illogical, but I suppose if you put a bullet in the perfect spot, maybe it would take it down. I don't know. It's pretty not, I don't know.
If anybody can do it, James Bond
There
can
you
do
go.
it. And it feels like a last-minute rewrite because, let's face it, it
Right.
was. I mean, they had the 2014 Sony hacks
Yes.
leaked the scripts
Yeah.
to this, and it needed to be rewritten at the last minute. So it actually was a last-minute
Yeah.
rewrite. So I'll forgive them for that. And I love London so much that I don't mind going back there. I don't want every Bond film to take place in London because part of the appeal of Bond is the globe-trotting nature, and he's always going to these different exotic places. Yeah. But it didn't bother me this time around.
Yeah, listen, I do, like, I mean, even in Skyfall, I did like the idea of them spending a little time in London. I thought that was pretty interesting, and you don't see it too often. And it's sort of ironic because, I mean, seriously, for, like guys like us who want to travel and go see all the Bond locations, like, there's not a shit ton in London. I mean, you go to the MI6 building, you go take the picture on the pole where Lazenby was, and then you walk across the street to the door from Dine of the Day. There's not a whole lot else from the film, so it was kind of cool that Skyfall just spent a little time there. But yeah, no, that's kind of one of my big problems is that I kind of felt like the Craig movies as a whole, they Quantum and Spectre make the same mistake. Casino is great, so they say, okay, let's do kind of an unofficial sequel to Casino. Then they're like, all right, well, that wasn't so great. They do something fresh. They do Skyfall. It's different. It's exciting. And then they're like, well, Skyfall is $1 billion movie. We got to just do more of that. So all of a sudden you get these little rewrites where they're trying to wedge in ideas from Skyfall, going back to London, giving the other players more to do. So yeah, it's right. I mean, and and even Scott, like in our review, he says like he basically said the same thing. He said, look, there are a lot of really awkward moments in this, but I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. A lot of it really works, and yeah, and I'll tell you, I mean, I'm the first one to admit that I'm kind of guilty of letting, like, if something, it's almost like, whereas somebody will look at the whole product and then say, okay, the twist ending with Blofeld, that's bad. Okay, so that's a chink in the armor. Whereas I sort of look at it as like a pin in a balloon, and if it's bad enough, it can blow the whole thing up. And so I tend to be a lot more critical, and I probably shouldn't be, but yeah, that's kind of how I get, I guess.
I mean, you could get into a lot of what ifs and what could have beens and say, well, maybe this wasn't the right time to introduce Blofeld. If they would have just left him a shadowy figure in this film, and Franz Oberhauser could have been a pissed off guy working for Blofeld, who would be introduced in the next film. Okay, we could go down that road. But I mean, the film exists as it is. So we've got to talk about it kind of as the film exists. And there are a lot of things about it that I just think it gets right. The tone works for me. The characters work for me. And I think the shot of Bond as he's approaching Mr. White's cabin, and he's in that little skiff boat on the lake, that's one of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful shots in the entire franchise, especially in IMAX. It's just masterful. I know Hoyt van Hoytema gets a lot of shit for not being. Can I say that on your channel? For not being Roger Deakins, but I think he's a very good DP, and I think a lot of this movie is shot really, really well. I mean, it's one of the best pre-title sequences in the whole series, definitely the best of the Craig era, and it's part of that really good film cinematography.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't like the sepia tone.
That was my next question. Does that bother you?
I don't love it. I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to give it this like vintagey look.
Here's my
Everything is, sandy and gritty and it's supposed to look old and of another era. I get it. I don't love it. Have you seen the pre-title sequence color corrected?
Yes, I've seen the stuff on YouTube where they fix the colors. Yeah.
Do you prefer that?
I do. I feel like the whole to just drench the entire movie. Like if this was mild, in fact, like I think Octopussy has. If you watch that film, I feel like there's a mild color correct where it does get a little bit tan, but it's real mild. But I think even there it's a little distracting. Yeah, here, I mean, seriously, like when I show you this picture, I mean that is honestly like the whole movie is this color. Like I took this screenshot from the thing. Yeah, I think it's too much, and I would have much preferred. And what I liked about Skyfall was that they had like. They each kind of place they went had like a different feel. Like there was some things that like Scotland was sort of dark and dreary with a lot of kind of fog and stuff. It was kind of gray. The stuff in Shanghai is vivid. The Macau has sort of like the red and gold kind of colors to it. So I thought that was pretty slick, and I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, to give this whole movie just one wash of the same color, it definitely didn't do much. And honestly, like seriously, because like I do these reviews, like from doing the review and seeing the whole thing through, honestly, like I kind of found that it's even worse than I first thought. Meaning I can scrub through the whole film, and I've sort of watched that color just really not change much at all. So yeah, I don't think it's. I felt like it was sort of a last minute scramble. We don't have Roger Deakins. That was really cool. Why don't we do something that's a little experimental? Yeah, I didn't think it worked.
And that's funny because in my most recent rewatch last night, I noticed it in Mexico City and in Morocco. I don't notice it in the rest of the movie. Like it doesn't seem yellow in London. It doesn't seem yellow in Austria. I don't see those colors.
Yeah.
Austria, everything looks very white, obviously because it's covered in snow, and London kind of looks gray. I don't see the, that brown tan look that we get in Mexico City and
it's
Morocco.
Definitely less. I think you're probably right, but I think it's the colors are still muted though. It's not. I would hardly call them bright colors, but yeah, But you're right. Not quite so tan. Yeah, no, it's a good point.
Yeah, I was expecting it to look worse than it really did.
Yeah, true.
And like I said, some of those shots at the beginning of Mexico City and then especially in Austria are breathtaking.
Yeah. No, I'll give you that. How about this? How about the retconning of all of the Craig films by saying that he was sort of the guy pulling the strings? Because I'll give you my like. I'm jabbing, but I got an uppercut coming that I think really kind of KOs this movie. But but in general, what do you think about that?
I think it's contrived, but it doesn't take away from my enjoyment of it. It's unnecessary, quite frankly. I don't know why they decided to go down that road, but like I said, it doesn't take away from the movie. I think the plot is actually pretty topical and scary. So why they needed to somehow jam in the prior 3 films. I'm not really sure.
Well, I think, my take is that, again, and this is probably a lot of scrambling in the writer's room where they're trying to say, okay, how do we make this? It's almost like every film lately is looking for that kind of like, that twist, that added layer of like, we can't just have a regular bad guy doing bad guy stuff and Bond just saves the day. They have to sort of take it to this next level where it gets like really personal or something or other. And I kind of felt like this was sort of like their scramble to do that. And again, kind of, the Bond films always try to mimic successful things that are happening in other franchises, and I sort of felt like this is probably the closest they're ever going to get to like a Marvel sort of. It all led up to this, so yeah, I felt like it was. I mean, it was very ham-fisted for sure, but the bigger problem I have with it is that it's almost like, in Casino you had this secret organization behind the scenes, and we're all kind of wondering like, what's that about? And it's probably a case of like, like a horror movie where the less you see, the scarier it actually is. So when the secret organization was just sort of out there someplace, and they get more into it in Quantum, and then by the time they got here, I almost felt as if, and the picture, like the things with the pictures hanging in, the Xerox pictures of the faces hanging in the MI6 building, like I thought that was just real dumb. But I almost felt like the bigger problem is that they seem to have forgotten what they did up until this point. Like they had this organization sort of ready to go. And if they just kind of followed that to its next logical step, you could have had something pretty sweet. But instead, it was almost like they forgot what they had done, and they went back and tried to retcon everything. So, I mean, seriously, like the part where Q puts the ring on his laptop and it sort of tells him all this magical information, I'm like, are you trying to tell me that every one of these guys that Bond has ever run into has worn this ring at some point? Like, I didn't really get that. But, and the fact that they put Silva and tried to say he was part of Spectre, it's like, no, like he wasn't. We saw this movie. We know that was something different. So, it's, again, like, it's almost like, I feel like if they thought it through, they could have had, I mean, I guess my biggest frustration with the film is that there was a lot of really interesting possibilities, but they didn't seem to just put the effort into making the script work. And so again, I'm kind of all over the place at this point, but I feel like the bottom line is, again, they didn't remember what they did. So it was almost like they were retconning something that didn't need retconning. So they botched something that should have been a pretty easy landing.
That's fair, and I think different writers, we had the same writing team for Skyfall and Spectre, different assistant writers for Quantum and Casino, so that probably plays into it also.
Yeah,
but it doesn't. It doesn't bother me that Silva is connected with Spectre, because I think that's how the Judi Dench M, gets wise to the whole Spectre plot to begin with, and why she's able to send Bond that message, because she knows, like, Silva's beaten down my door. And I know he's connected with this guy, Sciarra. We need to follow this trail and get Sciarra and see who's behind him, too, because he's connected to Silva. So that part doesn't really bother me. And you bring up the ring. I'm sure you've seen the Spectre trailer a million times. Do you remember the wording in the trailer and how it was different from the actual film in that scene?
No.
So in the film, Q asks Bond, "Do you know who connects them all? Green, Silva, Lashif?" And Bond says, "Him." In the trailer, Bond says, "Me." Yeah. And I'm wondering if that was like a prior draft, and maybe that would have kind of opened up the story a little bit more. And instead of jamming Blofeld into everything, it would have connected James Bond to the plots of all of these things. Like, hey, you've uncovered something, Bond, and you kicked over the first domino, and look what's happening now.
Yeah. Right. there was a really good movie in here someplace. I totally get that, and I guess it's funny. It's like I guess sometimes, like if I see a mediocre Bond movie, I'm like, oh, it's great. It's a solid 5. Then I see another one that should have been at least an 8 or a 9, and they botch it up. So I'm like, I'm giving it a 2 because they ruined it. Yeah, I mean I could be just a little overly aggressive at some of these parts and some of these failed opportunities, but yeah, I don't know. It's one of those moments where you're saying to yourself, man, I wish I was sitting in that writer's room. I wish I was just, could have just mentioned, hey guys, in the other movie this happened, so don't do it this way. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of tough.
Well, it suffers from having like 2 A plots, and it seems like they couldn't decide which one they wanted to go with: the personal vendetta between Blofeld and Bond, or the Nine Eyes plot. And the Nine Eyes plot, I think, is actually a really good plot of a James Bond movie. And Bond's always been very good at catching like what the topical geopolitical threat is, whether it's the oil embargo or the drug trafficking or the Gemini mission or something like that. And now it's a year after Edward Snowden, so everybody is thinking of illegal surveillance and government overreach, and constantly being under watch by these unseen powers, and who's pulling the strings. What a great plot for a Bond movie. I think it actually that plot works. I like seeing Spectre, like this evil, shadowy Illuminati, pulling the strings, and Bond being the one hero who can take it down.
Well, I'll agree and disagree with you, because I do think that the effort was definitely there to be topical. It does, especially today. I mean, it does sort of ring true. I don't know. I guess the part of it that bugs me is that, first of all, they show there's too many instances where they seem to just sort of already know everything that's going on. So the Nine Eyes plot would be okay, but then when you try to sort of squeeze in a deadline, the countdown, this thing is going to go live at midnight, we got to stop everything, and it's like, well,
it's called the ticking clock. It works great in movies.
Yeah, right. I know, but like you show me a ticking clock where there's a bomb going to go off, I'm all about it. But like a ticking clock where just this program is going to run and they're going to get even more information than they already have, I'm not feeling it. Like, what if you missed your deadline and you shut it off 10 minutes afterwards? Like, is anything really gonna dramatically change? I don't know. It was kind of, that was kind of lukewarm. I like, it's like, especially if you're gonna go back to an old school Bond, give me a nuclear bomb. Give me something that's gonna blow up. Give me something. I mean, it's almost like they showed early on, like a very casual mention of the bomb going off in South Africa that makes the South Africans decide to vote to join the thing. Well, you already set off the bomb. Like I'm looking at the pictures of the smoke coming out of Cape Town. And it's like, well, that was the big explode. You should have stopped that. Not the program that they're going to run later because of that. So it's like I wasn't feeling the stakes at all.
That's interesting, because I think that the Nine Eyes plot makes the stakes feel real.
Oh, I don't know at all. I didn't feel any, like, again, I wasn't like on the edge of my seat at all because something bad was going to happen. I mean, it's just, I don't know. And not to mention, it was almost like, well, Bond isn't even really foiling that plot per se. He's over here just having a face-to-face confrontation with his buddy Blofeld and rescuing Madeline from the bomb, while Q is across the street, foiling the bigger plot. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of reminded, now that I'm thinking about it, it reminds me of Thunderbolt a little bit when that kind of nameless guy in the glasses tells Domino that he threw the switches overboard and the bomb can't go off. It's like, Bond should have been doing that,
Well, like I said, this movie has a hard time deciding what the main plot is. Right. Is it the personal story, or is it the Nine Eyes story? Is it about the Illuminati? And it can't make up its mind. That is a problem. that doesn't mean that I don't still like it.
No, and you know, it's funny. Like I'm looking at Tim Hands. He says, "Give me something as simple as the ATAC," and I think that's a good example of, like, I mean, the ATAC is a very simple MacGuffin plot. Like, they just tell us that we need it or something bad is going to happen, so we know. Like, is the stakes gigantic? Well, in the big scheme of things, I mean, they told us it is. But again, that's not exactly a ticking clock either. But I guess my problem is that the as you're watching it, if I sort of know what we're doing, then I guess I can get behind the big chase, the big race to get it before somebody else. I mean, even Casino Royale has an extremely simple plot. You know, Lashif is a cornered rat because he did some business dealings and it's going to blow up in his face. We're going to bring him in. I mean, again, not earth-shattering stakes, but the way the story works, I get caught up in it. So I'm kind of on board with what's happening. I mean, Bond is in a chair getting his nuts cracked, excuse me. You know, and so I can feel the pain that he's sort of going through, etc. I feel like the Nine Eyes.
I don't want to feel that.
What's that?
I don't want to feel that.
But I don't know. I guess, and again, plus the fact that, like, Q's over there doing all the work. We got, you know, my tech guys are gonna solve the problem. I'm just gonna go over here and have a little shootout with you. And yeah, I don't know. It's just wasn't really working for me.
It's got to be both brains and brawn.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it's something. Yeah, it has. Right, it has to be the threat has to be tangible. I mean, that's kind of what it boils down to, I guess. But how about the romance with Madeline Swan?
A lot of people knock this. They think it's really quick, but I mean, I keep going back to a high intensity, stressful situation. You know, these people survive something together. I see them falling for each other, especially with their backgrounds. You know, Madeline Swan being the daughter of this killer crime syndicate guy, and Bond being a government-sanctioned assassin. I get that there's empathy between the two of them. I mean, maybe a little too soon to say I love you. There could be a red flag there. Yeah. But I get them coming together, and it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it's right. I guess I don't know if it was working for me, really. I didn't know if... Like, again, I'm kind of waiting for the moments that I kind of feel the click happen. And I sort of feel like I felt it with Casino Royale. I feel it in Honor Majesty's here. I didn't quite feel it. I get the idea of it. And frankly, even, like, I thought Blofeld's comments about how she could have been the only one to understand him as the daughter of an assassin, etc., or something or other. But yeah, I don't know. I just kind of felt like it was kind of forced. And yeah, the I love you parts is tricky. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it
But maybe that's what he needed to hear to shock himself out of his stupor. I can go along with that. I mean, it is a movie, and Hollywood loves to pull conceits and tropes like that all the time. And it does make sense to me that after cheating death, fighting Mr. Hints like that, how they, what do we do next? Yeah. What else could they possibly do next?
Yeah.
You know, with your adrenaline running like that. I get it. I see it.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, and that moment after the train fight where they do. I'll bet you if they didn't have that, if that Sam Smith song didn't start playing, that song always drives me up the wall because I just felt like it's just so overly dramatic. Like play it down a little bit. Like, it's a little too on the nose. It's very heavy-handed. So when they bust into the, I felt if there was no music at all there, I think you probably would have had a chuckle. Like it would have been a funny moment. You would have gotten the kick out of it. But the music blaring up, like we're in this, or all of a sudden this sweeping romance. It's like, all right, calm down. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
And I kind of like that moment.
I'll tell you what, if that was...
It makes it look grand. It makes it look like Casablanca. This is a grand moment.
You know what? I'll tell you what, if they did move that train scene to the end, then the music I think would have made sense. Then it would have been like a full blown like moment where like where you need that moment where the tension, there's like a release of the tension. You know what I mean? I gotta feel like that could have been what that was. Yeah. So, but I don't. Well, actually, I tell you what, I'm gonna grab another beer. Hold that thought.
Meanwhile, I'll tell a couple of jokes or something. I've been preparing this defense for a while, so I've barely even looked at my notes. This is just a chat among friends. I'm not even sure who's watching. Let's find out, shall we?
Sorry about that. Highly unprofessional.
Oh no, believe me, I understand what that's all about.
What was I gonna?
Hopefully nobody tuned out while I had to cover for you.
So what was I gonna ask you next? There was something else I was gonna ask. So all right, so like on a scale of 1 to 10, like again, like and not movies in general, but like you're comparing it to other Bond films. You know what I mean? Like here's your list. You know, one of them you're watching all the time. One of them you never watch because you don't bother. 1 to 10, where do you rate it?
Solid 7.
Okay.
I put it up pretty high. It's not perfect. Is there a perfect James Bond movie? I don't think there is. I mean, even Casino and Majesties, which are towards the top of my list, Living Daylights, they're all good. None of them are perfect, but I mean, some have a level of greatness that others don't. And maybe I was over enthusiastic the first time I saw Spectre, and I thought it was the greatest Daniel Craig. I've tempered that enthusiasm. It is Casino. Casino is the best Daniel Craig, but Spectre's fun. The gun barrel's in the right place. The music, maybe it's lazy that they recycled the score from Skyfall, but the score from Skyfall is good. Bond riding away into the sunrise with the girl. Like those are the things I'm glad they brought back. It's just James Bond being James Bond. It's James Bond being cool.
Yeah, and that is the thing. I don't know. There are a lot of really good Bond-ish moments, and I guess maybe that's sort of like part of where I kind of get off track here is that, like, again, maybe I was just so used to the Daniel Craig version of James Bond, and now they're trying to sort of wedge in a little of the Roger Moore-ish kind of moments, and it's like, I don't know if it fits. Like, it's sort of like a blending of different tones, and you can, there's a way to sort of do that to come up with the perfect cocktail, and then there's the pieces don't fit. I don't know, so I'm not sure. I don't know.
I mean, I find myself pulling this one off the shelf more than Skyfall, just because I have a better time watching it. Skyfall seems like work.
Really?
And it's a lot of angst and a lot of it's kind of, it's a slog. It's a bit of a downer.
See, that's funny because that's interesting too, because again, I've always sort of felt like, I mean, I agree with you that by the time Skyfall comes along, you're saying to yourself like, okay, can we stop with the personal angsty stuff, the childhood stuff? But I kind of felt like Spectre just sort of doubled down, like as opposed to being lighter than, like, I mean, again, like literally going back to his childhood pal, to find their bad guy, talk about fathers and stuff. So I felt like they were trying awkwardly to get back into that angsty youth stuff, and it's like, boy, enough of this already. So I see, I guess, and I told Tom this before too. I said, I think I'm kind of an easy lay if the film looks good. Like if it's a good, I've seen the trailers for No Time to Die, and I'm already saying I'm gonna like this movie. Like I know I'm gonna like it because it's visually looks great. So, I might walk out complaining about the script. I might walk out saying that the story didn't work, but I know at least I'll kind of like get a visual treat. So that's why I feel like if Spectre just looked better, I could probably forgive a lot more stuff. But I mean, like you said, there are a lot of good looking moments in it. But yeah, the CPU wash thing, I don't know. I mean, like Skyfall, I feel like I could watch really good just because I like the score and I like the look of it. Like at the very least, I get that. If that makes sense.
And the way I kind of describe it is Skyfall might be the better capital F film. I just find that Spectre is the better James Bond movie. You know, Craig nails the character this time. I mean, that's the James Bond character that I like to see. I want to see him having fun. I want to see him succeeding at his mission. You know, at the end of Spectre, C is dead and Blofeld is in jail. At the end of Casino Royale, Mr. White gets the money and Vesper dies. At the end of Quantum,
well,
it's not a total screw up, I guess. And at the end of Skyfall, M is dead and they never get the knock list back. And you know, basically, what was the point of that?
I totally agree with you there, because I remember by the end of Skyfall, I remember saying, wow, I've seen 3 Craig Bond movies. I haven't seen him. A, he hasn't completed the mission yet. He hasn't solved the whatever dilemma. And B, he also never gets the girl. So it's like, boy, this is really like, yeah, he's kind of 0 for 3. But then I watched Spectre, and it's like, well, all right, so you made the Spectre base, like they could have built it with matches and gasoline. You know, like I want to see Bond rise to the occasion, not all the missions just get easier and easier. You know, then Blofeld shows up all by himself so that he's so really easy to take in. You know, so yeah, I don't know. I kind of felt like it was almost like the like instead of jumping higher over the thing, they just lowered the bar a little bit to help him get over.
So do you think they introduced Blofeld one film too early? Or do you think that they should have just made Christoph Waltz's character Blofeld with no Franz Oberhauser conceit?
And you know, and Tom asked something similar, and basically the way I look, it's kind of a complicated question because, again, there's a lot of other peripherals that would have to sort of change too. Like, I mean, if they just did Franz Oberhauser and he was just another cog in the wheel of Spectre, and we still haven't quite gotten to the big guy yet, I mean, they could have even full blown kind of like if it was a little more like Thunderball, where, like, again, we're dealing with number 2, let's say, and then Blofeld is still sort of the shadowy figure, we haven't seen him yet, and then he comes out in the next film. I probably would have liked that better. I mean, it's, and if they had, see, here's the thing, like, let's say they did the Oberhauser part, it's the guy that Bond was childhood pals with, etc. I probably still would have kind of gone, well, wait a second, but we just kind of did something real similar in Skyfall. We did, M knows this guy from the past, and he came back to make trouble. Well, now we're kind of doing the same exact thing with somebody from Bond's past who just doesn't like him and comes back to make trouble. So I probably still would have been like, yeah, I don't know, don't do that so soon. I mean, and if they were going to do Blofeld, see this, I mean, if I knew this was going to be Craig's last film, I don't know. If you're gonna do Blofeld, you gotta do it a little differently. I wish that I think in a perfect world, this movie would have been about the number 2 guy. Like, it would have been very Largo-ish, and honestly, it's ironically, the pattern would have stayed pretty close to the Connerys. Because, like, I mean, in the first one, he goes against Dr. No. He's part of a bigger organization, but we don't know anything about that yet. In From Russia with Love, we see more of the organization. That's kind of like what Quantum was. And Skyfall, they skip that whole thing, right? We just get a guy from Judi Dench's past, just like Goldfinger. They skipped Spectre and Goldfinger altogether. By Thunderball, we're getting back into that. Like, it's almost like if they took this film and blew it out into 2 movies where, like, we had the big boardroom scene, we see the guy, but we don't know who he is yet. You know, Bond maybe goes in, he sees it, but he never gets a look at the guy, he leaves, etc. And then by the 5th one, we finally come face to face with this guy, and there is some big showdown, and maybe he gets away, maybe he doesn't, etc. I think if you introduce the Blofeld character slower, see, I kind of felt like all of a sudden they got the license to do Spectre, and they're just like balls to the wall. They go, well, we got to do the whole Blofeld story right now, and here's how we're gonna do it, you know. And by the end, we're gonna march him off to jail. I don't know. You don't crack the organization and then an hour later solve the whole thing essentially with one bullet, which is how he blows up the headquarters.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that this should have been sort of the Thunderball. This should have been the one where Bond took out number 2. And then the next one, Encounter Blofeld. And Franz Oberhauser could have been number 2, who joined Spectre because he was pissed off at James Bond. And I think that if they wanted to go the brother way, that would have been a better way to do it.
Yeah, and you could have... See, like, you know, I'm having flashbacks now of Lethal Weapon 2. Do you remember... Have you seen Lethal Weapon 2? Remember you know, he meets the bad guys, and then the one guy goes, Riggs, are you Martin Riggs? You know, that all of a sudden, and Riggs is like, yeah, what do you care? Then you find out later... Yeah, I'm the one who pushed your wife over the cliff, etc.
Who killed your wife?
Like something like that, I think, here, where you just toned it down a little bit, where you could have had some connection, and like maybe like, again, this is the number 2 guy of Spectre, where it's like, this James Bond has mucked with our plans, and now it's going to get a little personal, we're going to get him, etc. Without going the full-blown, I'm your foster brother. That might have been the way to do it.
Fair enough. What do you think of like a lot of the little like in jokes for serious Bond fans, like the dialogue from Colonel Sun being in the torture scene, or the safe house being called Hildebrand Prince in Rarities, like things like that. I go crazy every time I see an Easter egg like that, because that's written for people like you and me.
I thought the Hildebrand one was really good. The I'll be brutally honest, and I'm going to lose my Bond card. I never actually read Colonel Sun, so I didn't make the. I'd heard that this is from that, but I never read it, so I didn't make the connections right away. But the Hildebrand got me, and I was like, oh, that's a thing. So I do like that. And by the way, I do sort of feel like, you know, like I like doing these debates and these sort of back and forth about, you know, the merits of the film. I do hate that I'm kind of basically trying to chisel away your enjoyment of the film. But
well, hopefully I'm making you like it a little bit more. So if you like it a little bit more and I like it a little bit less, that's kind of like what these debates are for.
I do feel that this conversation tonight has kind of like, maybe I'll be able to sort of look at it again with kind of fresh eyes and not so focused on all these negatives and kind of just sort of trying to appreciate the positives. Because again, I mean, it does have positive stuff. Like you said, the scenes that we mentioned, the Lucia scene with the assassins is great. The train fight is spectacular. So I think for the most part, there's a lot in it that really does work. But again, that kind of those rewrites, last minute rewrites, the third act problems, it really does unravel. And it's almost like once I get something in my head, like I said earlier, I kind of felt like if you really do just buy onto the idea that, again, that he's been pulling the strings all along, he is, he's the cause of all Bond's problems, etc., then you really have to say to yourself, well, doesn't that make Bond a terrible, terrible detective? Because at no point did he have any clue until he was literally told to go shoot this guy, go to the funeral, and then, like, when he shows up at the meeting, he's literally allowed in. Blofeld basically lets him in and knows he's there. So it's like, at no point was Bond ever an active participant in this. Like, at no point did he know... I feel like there's another guy all along, etc. Like, he never had a clue. So again, you really have to ask yourself, like, well, like it was, like, I shouldn't let a thing like that bother me so much. But honestly, like, again, once I sort of realized that, it really does kind of ruin it. Where I'm like, geez, like, again, they literally wrote Bond into being a terrible, terrible detective. So.
That's fair. I mean, I think Bond works better when he's a good investigator and he's proactive rather than reactive. Sort of like Dr. No versus Thunderball. In Dr. No, he's the one setting everything in motion. In Thunderball, he's kind of reacting to what happens to him.
It's funny, too.
Spectre, he is reactive in Spectre. I'll give you that.
Yeah, I mean, it's also one of the same problems I got with Goldfinger. I mean, and it's kind of sacrilegious to pick on Goldfinger, but I feel like that's another example where it's like, well, Bond is in captivity for the second half of the film, and I kind of feel like, how exciting is it if he's not even really an active participant in what's happening? So, yeah, I don't know. But I do agree. I kind of feel like I've kind of softened on it a little bit.
Well, and there are a couple of things we should remember. I mean, it did win an Academy Award for the best song, which it's not my favorite Bond song, but you have to respect it for that. And it was a smash hit at the box office. And quite frankly, it opened a month before The Force Awakens. So in any other box office season, it probably would have done Skyfall numbers.
LTW FTW says the Rome meeting should have taken place after the Austria scene. They deflated a lot of the tension by having Blofeld and Bond make semi-contact so early. And I agree with that as well too. Again, the build-up is it's a little off. Like I definitely agree with that. They could have handled that better. Like, I mean, that should have been sort of like a big scene, and kind of not so much. Yeah, maybe if they put that a little later, because I mean, seriously, again, so that's one of the things I said in the review. I said this, it's very, very it's a very nitpickable movie, and it's like, are all of these things deal breakers? No, but there are so many little things that kind of just like little splinters that just sort of get under my skin. Yeah, big one. Honestly, like the scene where he goes to see Mr. White, like, there's a whole meeting, for God's sakes. Like, when he goes to the big Spectre boardroom meeting, they're literally having a meeting about who's gonna go kill this guy, right? Like, this is a big thing. Like, I mean, even in the pre-titles, he overhears Sciarra say that his next thing is to go kill this guy. Then he goes to the boardroom meeting over in Rome. We need somebody to go kill him. And it's like, and they have one guy auditioning for the job, then Hinks comes in, he takes over, whatever. And it's like, all this to kill this little old man that's already half dead because you poisoned him with something. I mean, isn't he dying anyway?
He's already dying, yeah.
Right. So like, stuff like that, it's like, once like some Bond movies, like, and here's the thing too, it's like, am I being too harsh by, going back and combing through scenes for the inconsistencies and things that don't work and the plot holes? But honestly, I mean, we are living in an era where people are going to watch, like, you don't just plop it in the theater once and never see it again. Like,
true.
We all get Blu-rays, we watch it over and over. So I mean, you should work to make the scripts tighter. And I feel like, especially for, $1 billion franchise like James Bond, why not work the script until you work out the little details? Why does everything sort of feel like it's totally off the cuff and just run out real quick? So the part about Mr. White having multiple conversations, like, seriously, and on top of all that, Bond still beats Hinks to the house. Like, Hinks basically, like, got the new job. He's supposed to be a pretty impressive guy, yet somehow Bond calls Moneypenny, figures out where he is, and beats him there. This organization doesn't know where the guy is this whole time. So, I don't know. It just again, it's nitpickable stuff, but a lot of it.
Where do you rank Mr. Hinks? Because, like I said, I think he's the best henchman since Mayday.
I'll tell you what. I think he's really good. I kind of felt like he was a nice nod to Odd Job. The fact that he was like a big, brawny guy, but he didn't say much. I'll tell you this, and I told this to Tom earlier, I frankly sort of felt like, I think I would have liked to see Dave Bautista play Blofeld a little more than I liked Christoph Waltz, because I felt like Christoph Waltz is a good villain when you put him in something like a Tarantino movie. Because a Tarantino movie, that any minute somebody can just go off. Like he can talk nice to you, but all of a sudden it's going to get violent. In a Bond movie, it's not going to get that violent. We'll tie you to a table and a laser is going to get pretty close to you, but it's not going to be like, gruesome like a Tarantino. So I kind of felt like Waltz was kind of wasted in that respect. then I thought, I said, but actually Dave Bautista, and especially after seeing him in things like Guardians of the Galaxy, I thought he could have pulled off a good Blofeld, shave his head, you could have even left the facial hair if you wanted. But yeah, I kind of felt like him, a quiet, doesn't need to say much kind of guy, kind of like a Paulie from Goodfellas.
Right.
He probably could have worked pretty well as Blofeld.
It would have been an interesting take, and maybe a little bit closer to the Thunderball novel, where Blofeld is kind of this big hulking guy, which we never really see in the films. Blofeld is always this shadowy puppet master, which I think Christoph Waltz is good as the shadowy puppet master. He's not a physically imposing guy. I mean, he's not going to go. He's not going to be even a challenge for James Bond in a fist fight.
Right.
But because he's so smart and so brilliant, that's what makes him scary. Whereas Hinks, I mean, obviously, is a physical threat to Bond.
See, it's almost like It's almost like if you're going to have Christoph Waltz, then you almost needed a scene that would have made him kind of like a Kaiser Soze kind of character, like where maybe you see him in a whole different capacity, where he's doing something you don't even know it's him, but he's right in front of you this whole time, and you just didn't even realize he was the bad guy. And then all of a sudden later he shows up someplace else, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe that would have helped a little bit, but I think if you're just going to keep him this kind of like quiet, imposing guy, then maybe like a Dave Bautista would have worked better.
And I like Dave Bautista. I think he's really good in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he is good. All right, brother.
So
what
are your final thoughts? What are your redeeming things and things you don't like? Which I'm sure you covered in your review. So.
Yeah, well, I think the good parts are the things we mentioned. I mean, I think there's a lot of really good individual scenes. There are some scenes that are good more because of the idea of what they're going for than the actual execution. But I mean, again, I think the assassins in Lucia's apartment, spectacular. Train fight, also spectacular, although I would have added a little more blood, because I remember I kind of laughed.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I said that. I said, like Casino Royale, Quantum, no matter what Bond did, he was always bloodied up, etc. And then all of a sudden, here he has the fight of his life, and he's kind of fine. Even the rose, the carnation on his lapel is still in good shape.
In a white jacket, no less.
In a white dinner jacket, no less.
Not a mark on it.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I mean, in the big scheme of things, like I said, if you move that to the end, you probably would have had something good. If you had an assault on the Spectre base, or the best thing to do would have been to spread this story out over 2 films, where you don't get the full Spectre, everything in one shot, where we introduce them halfway through and then by the end it's done. I mean, like Bond literally does take out the entire organization with one bullet blowing up that building. Yeah, I mean, honestly, they're probably, certainly there are worse Bond films, I guess. If you took that brother thing out, that probably would have resolved a lot of my issues, frankly. Well,
and it's so well made. I mean, they spent a lot of money on this movie, and it shows. So I have to appreciate it, if for no other reason than for that.
See, that's the honestly, I've heard people say that. Scott has said the same thing. I don't know if I feel like I see all the money on the screen. I mean, even the scene, and we didn't even talk about this yet, but the when Bond is got the plane, and it's after the mountaintop clinic bit, and he's following them in the plane, and he literally just kind of little by little the plane starts, the wings come off, and now he's just sort of sledding down the hill. I'm saying to myself, like, I mean, you're helpless. You are essentially, I mean, you just crashed a plane and you're hoping that it'll slide into the cars. Like, the cars have to be dumb enough. Like, at one point, he's sliding down the hill. He looks to his right. He sees the cars driving down the hill. The cars have to be dumb enough to make a left turn to get in front of the plane. So, I don't know. And I felt like the big crash through the building, good. But, I mean, honestly, I feel like that's probably the biggest set piece in the whole film, really. And then I kind of go like, well, was that worth it? I don't know if I see it. And then again, then I can just nitpick all day about Hank's going through the windshield. She's in the back seat. Like, does he even know that she's wearing a seatbelt? Like, this is, I don't know. For him to be able to take...
Sam Mendes, master of the epilogue. I'll say that, too.
All right, brother. So we've been going at this for a while. I do feel like you're kind of giving me a little food for thought.
Maybe if I could get you to just maybe pull that DVD off the shelf a couple more times than you normally would, I'll feel I've accomplished something.
Yeah. And I do feel like the exercise has been successful in terms of kind of getting me to see the better parts. And, you know, I mean, honestly, a lot of films in general, I feel like once you, like, even like Tomorrow Never Dies and maybe even Quantum to an extent, like, I remember like those movies, like a lot of the rapid editing was kind of, you know, I didn't like it, and the first couple times I saw it, but then once you saw it and you sort of got the initial shock out of the way, the next couple times you see it, it's not quite as shocking. So I kind of feel like maybe I'm doing the same thing with Spectre. Like, okay, the brother thing, yes, it's bad. It's not written well, it's not handled well, but
nobody likes that. Nobody likes that.
Yeah. So look at the bigger picture, look at the bigger film, and you know, maybe a couple splashes of blue over the sepia tone.
Have some fun with it, though.
Yeah.
You know, think about, would you want to be James Bond in this movie? Yeah. And your podcast and your book is called Being James Bond. So think about, is this the James Bond I want to be?
There you go.
For me, yes.
Very good. Very true. Oh, yeah. All right, brother. I'm kind of winding down. This was good, though.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks, partner. So stay with me. I'm gonna check the poll to see if it changed. See if
all right. See how I did. How the defense did.
There you go. Wow.
If Bond's suit doesn't fit, you must have quit.
I'll tell you what. Give me 1 second. I will make the necessary adjustments. You'll be, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. We just hit literally 50-50. It's exactly 50-50. And this is, dude, I'm telling you, and when we first started, it was, I mean, I guess that's the nature of a poll, is like when only a few people do it, it's drastic. But honestly, it was like, at one point it was like 80-20 that people didn't like it, and just little by little it crept up, and now it's 50-50. And it's like, seriously, like, I think people have been swayed.
Make James Bond cool again.
Very good. All right, brother, listen, thank you so much again, and we will definitely have to do this again.
Love it.
All right, brother. Be good.
Have a good night, Joe. See you later.
Take care. And thank you all for watching. Take it easy.